All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order this workshop of the Gainesville City Commission, January 26, 2022. This is to get a sort of first holistic look at our comprehensive plan update. And so first order of business is we just need a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes unanimously. All right, so let me just kind of lay out what we're going to be doing tonight and also what we're not going to be doing. First of all, want to congratulate Commissioner-elect Cynthia Chestnut. Although we haven't certified the results yet, she looks clearly to be the winner of the elections, and so we look forward to working with her. Her swearing in will be on February 17th, is that correct, sir? February 17th at 9 in the morning here on the steps of City Hall. So congratulations. I imagine she's probably watching, so she can get all the information in real time as well. So Commissioner-elect Chestnut, congratulations. Can't wait to get to work. Second, we have been undergoing a process for probably over a year now to update our comprehensive plan. This is something that's required by the state of Florida every 10 years. Every city must do it. And so we have been working on that. And you're going to see some of the ways that we've really been trying to connect with and get meaningful feedback from every part of our community, every neighbor, organization, anybody who might be impacted by this. Tonight is not the end of that process. Tonight is sort of the beginning of the end of that process. So we've taken all of that feedback, and our staff has worked to condense it down to the document that you'll see presented to all of us tonight. And so if there are things in there that you like, that you have questions about, that you have concerns about, or if there are things that are not in there that you think should be, there's still plenty of time to let us know that. And so we'll provide some different avenues for connecting with us and sharing those ideas. So I want everyone to think about this as just a big sort of wide angle look at what work has been done so far and kind of where we are. And then over the next several months, we'll be refining this and finalizing it. And eventually the commission will take action. We'll send it to the state for their review. When we get it back from the state, then we'll take final action. And that will be the governing document, the guiding document for everything from transportation to building and development to our environmental policies for the next 10 years. So it's really an important step in our process. If it works for the commission, what I would prefer, I know sometimes this is hard, but what I would prefer is if we allow staff to go through all of the elements at the beginning. Just so everybody, because they do intersect with one another. While they pull them out separately, they all reinforce one another. So let our staff get through the entire presentation, and then we'll go back and have discussions element by element. So we can answer any questions, get any feedback for each element if there are any, and then at the end of that, we will invite any members of the public that want to share some views now with us based on what they've heard, learned, or just want us to be thinking about moving forward. We also do have Commissioner Hayes Santos with us. He is joined virtually. And so, Madam Clerk, if I'll just depend on you if he raises his hand, just let me know and we'll get him in there. But does that sound like a process that will work for everybody this evening? All right, excellent. So with that, I'll invite up Andrew Persons, who is the Director of Sustainable Development and who has really been the lead on this. I know that he is very humble and will share that there are many other people that have been intimately involved with this. But Andrew, we know that you have sort of lived and breathed this for the last year and probably dream about it when you close your eyes at night.
That is actually
so we thank you for all that work, and I will turn it over to you. and let you kind of take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, Andrew Persons, Director of Sustainable Development. So I think that was a great introduction, and I think it's accurately sort of reflects where we are in this process. I've been talking about this stage as sort of a milestone or a mile marker along the process that we've been on. What's before you tonight is not the totality of the plan, but it is the main sort of body of the plan. I'm really, really excited. I think we've talked a little bit about this before, but we are absolutely the first jurisdiction in the state of Florida to so comprehensively, pun intended, weave racial equity, social justice, environmental justice into every element or every chapter of our plan. We're one of the few communities in the entire country that is doing this work. So we're really on the leading edge, but there's still work to do. Each of the chapters will have supplemental sections, which will cover more of the technical or issue-specific policies, many of which we have in the existing comprehensive plan. They're solid policies. They need to stay in the plan for various statutory or regulatory or other types of just city functions. Those are still being worked on with the cadre of staff that I have on the line tonight, and those will be bringing forward later this year as part of the total sort of adoption package. So if there's anything that you see that you really like and you want us to work on more, if there's something you see or don't see, there's still, as the mayor indicated, there's still time to work on that. So I have Lydia Gaby here from HRNA. She's actually going to be leading us through the presentation. But I do want to recognize that we have a cast of characters on like comprehensive plans, like what's in the name. Comprehensive means that this has been a total city effort. We've had multiple charters involved. We've had staff from all over the organization. I would love to take personal credit, but it is actually, as you said, all of the hard work that's gone in from staff from across the organization to bring us here tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lydia, and I'll be here. And as I said, we'll have staff to answer any questions after we get through the presentation.
Great. Thank you. Lydia, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're really excited to be here, and just throw it over to you and lead us away.
Thanks, Mayor Poe, and thank you, Andrew, for that really great introduction. I'm really looking forward to this workshop to share with you all the update as to where we are. For everyone on the line, the comp plan is this legally binding document that helps to guide the city through the process of making decisions about where we invest, how we invest across the city of Gainesville, with a particular focus on land and land use and physical investment. So before we jump in, the staff across the board has put in a tremendous amount of work in this process. We're really excited to share with you a lot of the different strategies and ideas that have come up so far. Before we get into the substance of the presentation today, I want to share with you a couple of other things that have really characterized this work to date. One on accessibility and the design of the plan document itself. It's very important to the commission, to everyone across the Gainesville community, that as we put together such an important type of document, that we do so in a way that makes sure that we're emphasizing accessibility. And that means language accessibility. That also means that we're describing our thinking, how we're prioritizing our investments in a way that is easy to explain. It's easy for people to read and understand, that we're not, burying the lead with a lot of content and you have to really search and dig for the information. When we came into this process, we really, went through an intentional effort to redesign the comprehensive plan itself. And what we have right now is a significantly shorter document that includes a lot of narrative that if you want to follow along and understand the thinking, now you're able to. So I wanted to point out that there's a lot of work that's been done on positioning the city for the leadership and success that we want to have, in terms of just having a document that is able to be what we needed it to be as a guide for that decision-making process as we go forward. I also want to call out a couple of unique things that we've done to welcome in community feedback, including piloting some new formats for community meetings and input, launched a new interactive website. As Andrew mentioned, there's plenty of time for continued input, and we welcome you in particular to go onto our interactive website on the City of Gainesville to add some comments to the draft plan. If you have any feedback that you'd like to continue to add, there's opportunity for you to log online and do that, as of today, or it's open for a little while now. We've piloted a lot of new tactics, including things like a fellows program that welcomed in community members to play a leadership role in thinking through this in a much more deep way rather than just joining a meeting here or there. We've done things like created videos. We've provided materials for people to have their own meetings and share with us their feedback. So we've really done a lot of work to try to bring in different kinds of comments, particularly from those who have not historically participated, but we welcome you to continue providing that input as we go forward. And the last thing I'll say before we're launching into the presentation is on throughout this whole process and our work with the city staff, we've really seen a tremendous amount of growth in terms of our ability to speak fluently and understand deeply these concepts of disparity across the city. I think when we first started off on this work, a year and a half or almost 2 years ago by now, there was a lot of talk about race and disparity and problems at a high level, but some questions about, well, what does this mean in terms of the work that we need to do to change how we do our work, how we make investment decisions. And just wanted to note that, in our work with the staff across the board, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in terms of everyone's, growing into not only understanding their place and their role in that, but really taking a leadership role. And what you're going to see in the presentation are a lot of their suggestions around strategies for how can they not only react and respond to, some of the histories and legacies of disparity that exist across the city today, but where can we be proactive and step into a new role that does more than what we have in the past to address some of our biggest challenges that we see. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation. As Mayor Post said, I'll go through all of the slides. It's quite a bit of content to get through, all up front, but I'll make a presentation all the way through and then come back section by section so we can open up the floor for discussion on the different chapter elements themselves. Okay. So, what's included in this presentation are two things, a quick summary of what the plan should accomplish, and then an overview of the draft plan content. Again, all of the chapters are included in full on the city website for comment, and what we're going to be seeing today is a summary of that draft plan content. So in terms of what the plan should accomplish, just to bring us back to our original mandate for this work, the commissioner's input has really shaped the priorities around what this plan must accomplish through its process and through the ultimate outcomes. In terms of outcomes, the plan must tell a clear story about what the comprehensive plan is, why it matters, and how it addresses inequities. It must translate the goals of equitable development and racial equity into concrete and actionable policies. And it must be clear and accessible, must be easy for anyone within the city or within our community to understand what are we trying to do and how are we setting ourselves up to do that. In terms of process, we must make sure that we're hearing from people, particularly in underrepresented neighborhoods and other groups who haven't historically been a part of the planning process. It's not those who are the typical faces who always appear at community meetings. We're reaching out to broaden that net. And then we're also collaborating with other non-city stakeholders, and we're building partnerships throughout this work. So we're reaching out to collaborators at local universities and businesses and other partners who are important partners as the city does this work, because we acknowledge that we can't do this work alone. So in addition to all those mandates from the commission, community members' input has also shaped the plan. Here are a couple of the specific tactics and formats that we've used throughout this process. I won't read everything on the slide, but at a high level, we've hosted virtual listening sessions. We've conducted a lot of direct outreach and targeted interviews. We allowed community members to lead their own discussions. We've created a dedicated interactive website, leveraged social media, created videos, appeared on different types of public media, and hosted an Imagine Fellows Fellowship, along with a slew of other smaller things that have happened across the process. But again, there's still opportunity for input, and we encourage that to happen as well. I'll go through this section quickly because I know we want to get into the content. But in terms of some of the things that we concluded up front that this plan must do differently than plans in the past. First, we want to talk here about centering Black Gainesville and other underrepresented residents who have been harmed by discriminatory actions or preferential decision-making by government historically. Those actions have created the inequities that we see across life in Gainesville today. And despite those disparities, much of the comp plan as it exists today doesn't explicitly address those or plan for that to change. So this plan, attempts to do that much more explicitly and directly. We're involving the entire city organization, making sure to include important elements of city life that today are missing from the plan, that we're addressing challenges that require coordinated action across city agencies more effectively, and that we're engaging with agencies outside of the Department of Sustainability as well, including across the entire organization and with other charters. And third, the plan today doesn't identify responsible agencies, doesn't have measurable targets to draft progress, and it includes some lofty goals and actions, but the other documents that work to actually hold us accountable, including the Land Development Code, aren't set up to effectively hold us accountable to actually implementing these ideas. There wasn't a lot of clarity really about how this work moves forward, and it didn't have any clear definitions or frameworks for how to define disparity, how to define racial equity, and how do we use this as a way to address the gaps that we see in our community today. So the plan today hopes to address all three of these things that we determined up front. And just one example of what can this do differently that wasn't possible before, but hopefully with a revised comprehensive plan and a new design and a new approach, this new comprehensive plan can do more effectively. So Seminary Lane provides an active case study for how a better comprehensive plan can enforce resident priorities. So imagine a world where the plan sets clear targets for preserving and providing affordable housing, where it identifies who's responsible for tracking progress and keeping us accountable to those goals. A plan should help us to weigh our competing goals and provide our clear standards for what should we allow as projects to move forward. Should guide our decision-making around things that, for instance, public property that are within public control. And we should require outreach on a regular basis that lead to outcomes that better reflect, the concerns and issues that are raised by the community. So just to bring to life, this is part of the promise of a better comprehensive plan. And we're hoping that in the way that it's designed today and with further input that we can reconcile and incorporate, that we're able to meet all of these goals. So I'll launch now into the draft plan content. This section is structured by chapter. These are all of the chapters currently included in the comprehensive plan. I won't go into the sub-bullet, but at the top level, there's going to be an introduction section that gives a little bit of information about Gainesville today, where we are, the disparities that we see, and then these other sections where we live, how we get around, how we learn, how we work, how we build, our health and well-being, our cultural identity, our city government, and our environment. These are the sections or the comprehensive plan chapters or elements that we'll be stepping through in our conversation. So starting first with how we learn. This is the first chapter content that you're seeing today. And just to give you an overview about these slides and the way they're structured, on the left-hand side is a brief summary of what we're calling where we are. In each of the chapter drafts, there's some narrative language that describes kind of our current situation. What are some of the big issues that we're dealing with or things that we need to address and resolve? And on the right-hand side, we're calling strategies. These are sort of the pillars of action that we think need to be advanced in order to address some of the issues that are raised under where we are. Before I go into the content, just to flip to explain the structure of the following slide, in addition to those overarching strategies or overarching outcomes, things that we're hoping to achieve, we have on these sequential slides a list of strategies. So these are the actual types of activities and actions that over the course of the next 10 years or so, however long the comprehensive plan is in effect, these are the different specific strategies that staff across the city of Gainesville with our partner organizations, we would be advancing in order to get to those outcomes that are listed for a reminder on the left. So just to back up and focus specifically on what we're saying for how we learn. In terms of where we are, according to district assessments, we see a lot of what we call in the industry achievement gap. Black students in the public school system continue to perform below white and non-Hispanic students. There are significant achievement gaps between students of color and white students, and we continue to experience the impacts or the lasting impacts of residential and school segregation, as well as our inaction over the years to address those impacts that continue to prolong that disparity in experience and in achievement across our school district. So if that's where we are, some of the three main pillars of strategy that have been discussed within this comp plan process are listed here on the right. And the intention is to say, in 10 years' time, these three things ideally would be true. These are our North Star for this area. So our North Star here is that all Gainesville residents will have access to a quality public education, and all schools will benefit the surrounding community. Gainesville residents will have increased transparency into the decision-making process regarding schools. And all Gainesville residents will have access to resources that enable continued learning and training. So each of those three strategies has more underneath it that we're going to talk about here. So first, in terms of access to a quality public education and all schools benefiting the surrounding community. We have here 6 different strategies that staff at the City of Gainesville have identified as effective strategies to advance this with, again, this equity goal in mind. I won't go through everything word by word on these slides, but at a high level, some of these are about working with the school board to make sure that we're equitably distributing our resources to make sure that we have quality learning environments all across the city. When we are making decisions beyond land use, such as after-school activities, transportation, that we're considering the impact on kids who are attending public schools. We're making it, we're not making decisions that make it harder for kids to get to school or to participate in other types of activities. We're making it easier to get to school, to live to find affordable housing that is near high-performing schools. And then we're doing new things like using school facilities to make sure that we're supporting the neighborhood and providing things like after-school care. This is something in particular that's been really important throughout the COVID-19 pandemic that we've seen across the nation, where we really are recognizing that schools are a center for a lot of different resources in the community. And how do we use the comprehensive plan to make sure that we're not only supporting that, but advancing that to fulfill community needs? So all of that is within this first outcome. The second, we have a couple of specific strategies for making sure that residents have increased transparency into decision making. So one is establishing a neighbors education center, and the second is doing more outreach to neighbors when making decisions regarding schools, and just doing more to make sure that people are informed about these are the things that we're deciding and how that might impact you. And then the third and last area under how we learn is about making sure that we have access to resources to continue learning and continue training. So this is about folks who are learning beyond just within the public school system. So thinking here creatively about new things such as including in the comprehensive plan in a new way, a partnership for providing affordable broadband access, connecting people to training and job opportunities that provide the types of job skills that are really in demand across the jobs that are recruiting in Gainesville today, and doing things like establishing summer internship programs that help to engage youth at different levels in careers, particularly in local government, where we know that we want to increase the representation across who works, who makes these decisions. We want to make sure that that reflects our community and the diversity of our community today. So that's how we learn. Again, we're going to come back to this. I'm just going to continue breezing on through. The next section is our arts and culture. So in this section, we're talking about both things like historic preservation as well as arts and culture programming. And where we are today on this is that Black artists and artists of color are less likely to be featured in city programs and also less likely to have access to city events. Black voices are often let out of the discussions and decisions around historic preservation as well. And so a fundamental aspect of racial equity is that everyone can look around and see themselves in how the culture of the city is represented and that their identity and culture are respected and celebrated. And the desired sort of strategies and outcomes here are that, again, in 10 years, in that future, that desired future that we're working toward, one, all Gainesville residents are able to enjoy arts as a part of their daily life. It reflects their identity. And two, historic assets with cultural value are preserved based on community values. And one thing that I'd like to say is I know, throughout this document, we're pointing out Black residents in particular. This is one thing that, we do in racial equity work where it might seem like we're focusing in on one community in particular, but oftentimes when you focus in on Black voices, on Black artists, on Black residents, you can surface a lot of disparities that are also true for other aspects of our community as well. And by addressing those issues for one community, then you're addressing it for all of them. So just wanted to make that note before we go forward. Specific approaches under this first goal of enjoying arts as a part of daily life are strengthening partnerships with artists and communities of color, breaking down barriers, making it easy for them to participate in different programs, expanding different offerings, making sure that the staff who are putting on this programming has an awareness of the diversity of our community, of the cultures that they're represented, and that they've got some training and support to be able to do that work well and in a very inclusive way, including through outreach that ensures that the cultural programming of the city reflects the diversity of Gainesville's residents. This slide talks a little bit more about the historic preservation side of it, where the hope is to do three things: expand the definition of historic assets to include buildings or institutions that talk about the social history and hold cultural significance to non-white audiences. So this is an important step where we have to redefine what we mean by important. And it doesn't just mean, these historical architects have designed these buildings. What are other ways that we can make sure that we're defining value for our community so that when we make those designations to say that this house or this property is of historic value, that we're doing it with this cultural context in mind. So along with that idea, the second strategy listed here is to identify, map, and track the properties that should be protected against demolition or adequately maintained, and kind of turn the approach from being more of a reactive, if somebody organizes and doesn't want this property to come down, you're being proactive to say, we are designating that these are properties that we want to maintain. How can we, work with our community members to make sure that they remain of high quality as we go forward? And this third idea is something really exciting. We talked about this on our last presentation with the City Commission, actually, developing a plan for a community archive. There are several efforts, outside of the city of Gainesville to, act as a community librarian, collect stories, oral histories of people across our community. What would it look like for our city government to hold that responsibility as well and have that community archive to preserve those stories? So moving to the next section, we have how we get around. So today, your ability to get around in Gainesville is heavily dependent on where you live. Your access to transit, your access to a car, or your reliance on a car are very dependent on where you live throughout the city. That's a result of our historic decision-making. The funding structure for public transportation and RTS makes sure to reinforce that problem because you've got high levels of service in some areas, very low levels of service in others. And it's important that we make sure that all neighbors are served by an equitable, safe, reliable, and affordable transportation system. That's one way to make sure that people have access to lots of different jobs, that they can go to different schools, that people can get around effectively, really helps to support a vibrant economy. And so on the right-hand side, that North Star is that all Gainesville residents have access to that equitable, reliable, affordable, safe transportation. That regardless of their identity, they'll be less reliant on cars and live in neighborhoods that have quality infrastructures, such as sidewalks, such as bike infrastructures, that they aren't forced to be as reliant on cars as they are today. And 3, this is a little bit more related to Vision Zero, that Gainesville will have no traffic-related deaths or severe injuries. And so within these sections, again, I'm not going to read every single word, and we're going to come back to discuss it, but there are a couple of big ideas to point out. In terms of access, continuing to provide fare free transit, I think it's important to point out that staff have identified developing a mobility equity plan that identifies and addresses those gaps, those mobility challenges that are faced uniquely by different community groups across our city, that we're prioritizing our investments based on the need, and making sure that when we're planning, that we're doing inclusive outreach and engagement, and making sure that any transportation needs that we create by future development, we're also updating our transportation mobility program area to make sure that those are mitigated or addressed. So second, in terms of reducing reliance on cars, there are a couple of things that have come up as suggestions or of strategies for under the comprehensive plan. Requiring new developments to fund transportation improvements, prioritizing funding for pedestrian and cycling related infrastructure, encouraging biking by installing bike related infrastructure that makes it safer for people at all ability levels and minimizes conflict with cars, and reduce carbon emissions generated by transportation. So each of these has, there's work that staff would do in order to flesh out exactly what would the work be. But we're articulating a broad strategy that over the next, decade or so could be advanced to support this outcome. And third, around the idea of, or the goal for Gainesville to have no traffic related deaths or severe injuries. First is to advance the city's Vision Zero strategy. Second is to prioritize funding for projects that help to advance that strategy. It's incorporating Vision Zero into the development review process. Are we supporting the advancement of development projects that align with our vision for Vision Zero? And we're identifying communities that are disproportionately affected by traffic fatalities and injuries. And you'll see this throughout the entire plan draft today. We're targeting resources and we're targeting our interventions based on the need. We're going where there are a lot of fatalities and injuries in this case to make sure that we're not only identifying those communities, but prioritizing funding based on that designation. So the next section here is our environment. So due to a history of disinvestment in communities of color across the city, there's a lot of infrastructure in place today. So think about pipes and things that support drainage that is much older and much more vulnerable to flooding issues. And these issues are recurring across the city. So in addition to the disproportionate burden of dealing with flooding that our communities of color, folks who live in older homes, folks who don't have the resources to reinvest in this type of infrastructure face. In addition to that, we also have to deal with climate change. So climate change increases the risk of severe weather events, and that disproportionately impacts those communities that are more vulnerable, that are suffering from the impacts of aging infrastructure. So it's important that we make sure that everyone can enjoy an environment that is supportive of their quality of life and well-being and addresses these types of concerns. So there are 3 different, North Stars that we have for our environment chapter today. First is that our infrastructure, water, wastewater, energy infrastructure should be modern, safe, and reliable, and we're addressing that historic disinvestment. That all residents enjoy a healthy environment with clean air, clean water, clean land, and access to natural areas, and avoiding that idea of disproportionate pollution that happens in some communities. And that third, we have this overarching goal that's a little bit more about reducing our impact on climate change, that Gainesville will make significant progress to reduce the city's carbon footprint and combat climate change through regional efforts. So quite a lot here in terms of improving our infrastructure at a high level. Again, we'll come back to this to talk further, but prioritizing our investment based on the need and incorporating those types of analyses into the work. developing new programs and new resources that can support low-income homeowners or those who need to modernize their infrastructure. We're making sure to address the impacts of new development. When a new development comes in, that can increase the hard or impermeable surface that makes it easier for the area to flood, or maybe they're not investing at the same time in improvements to the infrastructure. We're mitigating those impacts by making sure that our infrastructure serves the development as it grows and expands. And then we're doing things like creating a climate action and resilience coordination role and leading and establishing those regional coordination strategies to not only respond to flooding and these issues as they arise, but begin to think proactively about what can we do over the next 10 years to really take this goal seriously and make sure that we are doing what we can to reduce our climate impacts. Second, in terms of access to a healthy environment, 4 strategies were recommended. First is to conduct a comprehensive environmental justice study to, again, kind of identify those disparities. Who is disproportionately close to pollution and polluting sites or superfine sites, and how can we begin to identify those areas before we address it? How are we able to prioritize acquiring land for conservation purposes in areas that don't have as many parks or dedicated areas for that? We're updating our urban forest management plan. It's really important to have a healthy tree canopy for our environment, also for our human comfort and shade and oxygen and clean air. And that we're developing strategies to make sure that sites that are often called, they're right here listed as contaminated sites, sometimes they're called brownfield sites, that we're making sure to address any barriers to bringing those spaces into productive use and using those as an opportunity to build things that we need. We need parks, we need housing, we need things like grocery stores. How are we able to take advantage of this as an opportunity to create more community resources? And third, in terms of reducing Gainesville's contribution to climate change by 2045, generating all energy from renewable sources, creating comprehensive strategies to lower our government's carbon impacts, promoting conservation, and diverting solid waste from methane-producing landfills. Methane is one of the greenhouse gases that has the strongest impact on climate change and greenhouse effect. So that's for our environment. The next section here is our health and well-being. So in terms of where we are today, there are really stark differences in health outcomes. So for instance, a 2020 study in Alachua County found that life expectancy was lower for Black residents compared to white residents. There are a lot of causal factors underneath those types of things, but one of them is inequitable distribution of healthcare facilities. And these types of disparities are things that we can address to make a difference and say that, we want to lower that gap in life expectancy between our different aspects of our community population. So through the Imagine GNV plan, the city will focus on creating equitable access and experiences with respect not only to healthcare and healthcare facilities, but also things like healthy food, exercise, fitness, and recreation. And those are some of the things that are included in this chapter as priorities. So the North Star for this section is that all Gainesville residents, including those experiencing homelessness, have access to the healthcare that they need, including mental health support, that everyone has access to affordable, healthy, and culturally appropriate food, that residents have access to quality park spaces, facilities, and recreational programs, and that they're protected from hazards. So going through each of those 4, in terms of providing the medical care that's needed, there is a series of strategies here that are about increasing access through provision of healthcare services, launching messaging campaigns that make sure that people understand how important it is to access these things, what's available to them, that we're promoting these types of programs and supporting outreach teams via GRACE and other mechanisms to augment our permanent supportive housing, or we're celebrating volunteerism around public health and getting everyone involved in not only participating, but also kind of culturally acknowledging that wellness is a value for all of us in Gainesville. In terms of healthy food, this is a very popular topic that came up a lot in community conversation. Some of the strategies that are included here are promoting production of healthy food through partnerships, regulatory tools, programs. This is a pretty broad area for the city to explore going forward and taking a leadership role in. Increasing access to healthy food and promoting health food consumption through education and partnerships. Under access to park space, here is a lot of more of the kind of physical planning work. Let's consider accessibility today as we think about where should we prioritize the funding for new parks, for maintenance of existing parks, in order to make sure that everyone has that equitable access. That we're taking opportunities where possible to purchase additional land for park development, that we're offering new programs, that we're incentivizing new parks to be created, that we're establishing new systems and focusing on areas that have less access to parks, that we're, again, working within that urban forestry management plan to improve our tree coverage, particularly in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of shade and tree coverage, that we're reaching out to neighbors in the decision-making process, and that we're tracking our success, that we're asking, is this park serving your needs? Are these programs what you need right now, or what can we do differently? And lastly, in terms of protecting residents from hazards, there are a couple of strategies included here to call out. Continue supporting neighbors who have been involved in fires or accidents. I think the second one is one in particular to call out as an exciting addition to the comprehensive plan, which is dispatching different experts, such as mental health experts, through a new emergency response system that triages without slowing down the response time. There are a couple of others, including provide free smoke alarms, providing assistance to people who are in need of falls and are in need of reducing the risk of falls, and addressing community firearm safety. So the next chapter here is how we work. So this is all about employment. And today in Gainesville, who you are impacts your ability to find a job, your income, the support you receive to grow your business, lots of different things. And while past comprehensive plans included actions that support economic development more generally, they focused a lot on the physical environment, things like narrower segments of the economy, such as innovation, and didn't really think about this question of who benefits. Are those things, are those new jobs that we're bringing into the community, is that new job growth accessible to those in our community who are underemployed or unemployed or don't have access to jobs, and addressing disparities in our community. So, 3 areas to continue focusing are: all Gainesville residents will be able to secure a job that allows them to support themselves and their families, that Gainesville will attract, support, and grow businesses, and that small and minority business owners and entrepreneurs have the resources that they need to launch, thrive, and grow. So under connecting residents to jobs that allow for residents to support themselves and their families, there are encouraging strategies that include encouraging businesses to pay a living wage, providing support where that's needed. Make sure that the city itself is modeling that approach to equitable hiring and labor practices. Ensure that if you are receiving city subsidy, that you are modeling that model of equitable pay, equitable hiring practices, and that you're providing training opportunities to make sure that, again, we're addressing that gap of who needs jobs and who is currently able to work in these jobs that are available in Gainesville today. And that we're coordinating across city departments to support neighbors, not only in getting the job, but in keeping the job, including things like affordable housing, transportation, and quality health and childcare. I think we all have seen through the pandemic that without these other things, it's very difficult for many people to not only get, but also to hold on to a job for the long term. So in terms of attracting, supporting, and growing businesses, a couple of strategies are to ensure that our regulations, infrastructure, and real estate are set up to attract that growth, that we have the resources that people are looking for when they're looking to invest and grow a business, that we're attracting those target employers into neighborhoods that need more jobs, that we're identifying those gaps and skills that are existing across our community and providing training to prepare our community members to access those jobs and stay in those jobs. And that we're creating development incentives, we're working within our resources to attract, expand, and retain businesses more broadly. So under supporting small and minority business owners and entrepreneurs, a couple of opportunities listed here. Partner with organizations that can provide training and support. This is a huge need for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Making sure that the procurement process is transparent and easily accessible so that our city dollars are effectively supporting this community as well. Then we're making it easy for people to start a business. Oftentimes, many businesses start from the home. So where are we creating those barriers and how can we take those away? That we're building mentor relationships so that people who are getting into the business are able to grow and scale up, and identifying and addressing obstacles, particularly in accessing capital. And capital is another way of saying, dollars, the investment in the resources that are needed to expand a business. So again, moving to the next section here, we have a chapter or an element called Our City Government. This one talks a little bit more about within our administrative practice or protocols, how are we holding ourselves accountable? How are we doing what we can as an organization to support these strategies overall? So in terms of where we are at the national and local levels, perspectives and priorities for underserved communities, particularly communities of color, they have been underrepresented in very important decision-making processes. They've been underrepresented in the planning process, in the budgeting process, and in our processes of investing in our community. And this is about outreach. They're not involved in these making of decisions. And so we have a responsibility to improve those communities and positively impact their lives and kind of reverse that trend. And so a couple of things that are highlighted here as part of that North Star. In the future, it's a hope that all Gainesville residents have clarity and the resources that they need to understand how is the city prioritizing and making these kinds of decisions. That all of our policies are grounded in this idea of racial equity, where we understand the disparities that exist across our community and that we're explicitly addressing them. And third, that our city staff, our leadership, our committees are representative of all of Gainesville. And not only in who we hire, but who we contract out to, our vendors. Our contracting approach supports racial equity. So first, in terms of making sure that everybody understands how the city makes these decisions. One is to expand our efforts to build understanding. So that's, how do we continue educating about how the city does its work and what we have control over. Two is when city departments are setting priorities and making decisions about, the annual budget, the strategic plan, or other major investments, that you're considering these disparities that we've been talking about today. You're not setting your budget without looking at the disaggregated data that shows the disparity across our community, that we're looking at the priorities of who's impacted, and that we're looking at their lived experience to say, this makes sense in terms of we're improving lives. This third idea, this third strategy is a really exciting opportunity to find neighborhoods across the city or designate communities to serve as pilot Imagine GNV neighborhoods. And these would be areas that are really opportunities to bring the comprehensive plan to life, to work with that community with a percentage of the city's budget to decide what should we invest in. These are priorities that you need to that we need to decide how we advance, how we address in a way that works for you. And so this is an opportunity to kind of flip the planning process on its head, rather than folks on the inside of city government decide making all of the decisions and then that's what happens. This is an opportunity to welcome in our neighbors into that decision-making process, to come up with their own ideas and their own budget, and to see that process forward as Imagine GNV becomes this guiding document. It's something that they own too. In terms of grounding policies, plans, and agreements in racial equity, there are a couple of different strategies that can support this. One is developing and implementing an equity assessment tool. So this is similar to the second bullet of a racial equity framework. These are tools and resources that can help to make decisions that addressed disparity. So more than just a check the box exercise, I've thought about, race, or this is how it, supports quality of life improvement. Where are we making sure that throughout our decision-making process, we are considering, is this what we need to do in order to make our community better for everyone? Within that concept, we're developing and expanding the use of equity and implicit bias guides, toolkits, trainings to make sure that we not only are held accountable through those frameworks and tools, but we also know how to understand these topics and have a depth of understanding there that we can use for our activities internally. And fourth, this is very important and as a part of the interagency coordination elements that's required in all comprehensive plans. One of the things that we thought was very important is to not only hold the city accountable to doing what is possible within your purview, but also to make sure that in our agreements, formal agreements with other organizations, including University of Florida, Alachua County, the school board, that we're including things like a shared racial equity framework, that we're articulating, this is how we want to make our decisions. And that through our agreements, we're holding ourselves accountable, but also our partners. In this last section, in terms of representation, there's a lot of work that we can do to make sure that the city and our contracts reflect the diversity of the Gainesville community. So first are doing an audit of both our policies and practices, who's able to get the jobs working at the city, who's able to advance, are there barriers to hiring and sustaining a diverse workforce? So auditing those policies and practices, but also the composition of our boards, our charters, our committees, to develop plans that will help us to achieve that representation that we know is really important. We should also consider using training and development programs to retain our workforce and build the culture that we want to see that incorporates diversity and inclusion goals, that we're revising our definition of diverse suppliers and contractors to make sure that that includes a variety of business types and backgrounds, that we're looking at our procurement system, again, to make sure that it is accessible to all, and that we're looking at our long-term contracts. Where are our major dollars going? And questioning to make sure that are our dollars going toward vendors, towards suppliers, toward companies that are aligned with these principles of racial equity. Are we continuing to just re-up on those contracts without thinking, or can we take a moment to audit that and make sure that our dollars are supporting our values? So just a couple more sections left. I know it's quite a lot of content. Where we live. This is about housing. So in terms of where we are today, many residents across the city live in neighborhoods that lack basic access to services and resources. And at the heart of the disparity that we see today is a housing crisis. So it's incredibly important to ensure that our neighbors have access to quality and affordable housing. And that's one of the most important strategies to making sure that Gainesville is and remains a great place to live and work. So a couple of things to work toward here include that all Gainesville residents live in neighborhoods with diverse and abundant housing, easy access to jobs, and resources such as parks. That development does not displace. So this is recalling some of the gentrification and displacement concerns that we're explicitly addressing that and providing benefits rather than causing harm to neighbors in that area. That all residents should have access to affordable, quality, and stable housing, and that all residents have fair and equitable housing opportunities that are free from some of the discriminatory processes that lead to the disparity and segregation that we're still living under today. So that can include lending. It can include discrimination within the renting process, within the property management process, assessment and appraisal, lots of different ways that can show up that we wanted to include in here and explicitly address going forward. So first, under access to housing, how can we move forward to make sure that everyone has access to those housing opportunities that have the resources that they need all around it? First, making it easier to build and reduce the cost of building. So a couple of these strategies talk about that, removing barriers in the land development code that make it more costly, and that we're identifying the different needs of communities by doing assessments such as a housing needs assessment that we understand specifically in different areas of the city, where do we need more housing, and implementing our housing action plan. The city's housing department, as well as sustainable development, has been working on this issue tirelessly. And, this comprehensive plan provides support to say we should implement that. That we're enhancing underserved neighborhoods that lack basic services like grocery stores, like transit, like healthcare. That we're encouraging University of Florida and other educational institutions to develop housing on their campuses, because as many of you may know, the construction of student housing outside of those campuses is one of the reasons why market rents are becoming less affordable for Gainesville residents. That we're continuing to support permanently affordable homeownership opportunity, and that we're preserving and improving public housing as well. So all of these are strategies to increase access to quality housing in great neighborhoods. We've got 7 different strategies identified for addressing displacement and making sure that development provides benefits for our neighborhoods. So, first is tracking and reporting displacement, creating a quantitative approach. How are we not only responding to this as we hear comments from our neighborhoods, but we're creating data sets, protocols, methodologies to track this very specifically and give ourselves the ability to think forward and be proactive. Developing a program to rehouse tenants where their rental units are being demolished. So not just displacing them and they don't have anywhere else to live. Let's look into the opportunities to rehouse you. Developing anti-displacement programs that specifically are targeted to help stabilize lower income neighborhoods that might be more vulnerable to the impacts of, let's say if the market rents increase there, they're very likely to be displaced. The fourth strategy is expanding areas where you're allowed to build multifamily housing, and increasing the availability of multifamily housing is one of the major ways that you can make sure that people have more and additional options for where they can live. Establishing or supporting program and regulatory reforms that include requirements that incorporate permanent affordable housing in city-funded development. So if we're going to give you support for your project, if we're providing city subsidy, that we're requiring your project to include permanent affordable housing. The 6th strategy is to establish an inclusionary zoning policy that's based on market data within the city, applicable for new multifamily projects, and continuing to seek more funds to provide financial assistance to home buyers, because we understand that there is a significant home ownership gap for who can afford and has the ability to go through the process to buy a home and who can't. A slight continuation here. So a couple of others about, again, anti-displacement, collaborating with Alachua County to set aside funds for temporary housing vouchers, and requiring that development approvals include an analysis of community impacts and that they explicitly address displacement pressure or provide new community benefits. So this last one is very important and is one of the main ways that the city has an opportunity to influence the development process and make sure that we don't just allow displacement to occur unchecked. Third, this is about sort of making sure that all Gainesville residents have access to affordable, quality, and stable housing. So thinking about how we're making sure people have access to that on a permanent basis. There are a couple of things that can be done. Funding initiatives through direct allocation of programs. There isn't a long history of having a lot of funding or set aside within the city of Gainesville to support housing action. But as you can see from these listed programs, there are several opportunities that can be used to support housing initiatives. With that in mind, it's also a second strategy to track the efficacy of the funding sources spent on creating local housing, to make sure that the programs that we're giving to, the partners that we're supporting, are actually having the impact that we want, that our dollars are effectively translating into greater housing access. there are things that we can do, including designating the surplus city land. If there is land that could be used for other purposes, how can we designate that for perpetually affordable housing development? And you're seeing a lot of this commentary around permanent affordability, and that's a way to minimize the gentrification and displacement that people might experience in the future. We're leveraging public investments to recapitalize our affordable housing projects, extend those restrictions. So at a point, those properties no longer have to be affordable, or, quote unquote, there's a specific definition for what affordability means. And let's say after 10 or after 15 years, that requirement goes away, making sure that if we're contributing public dollars to those properties, that we're also making sure that those properties remain affordable moving into the future, that we're preserving our housing supply. And this last one is in response to a little bit of a need that we identified through this process. We're talking here about supporting a housing coordinator staff role that can help to do things such as identifying priority investments, recommending funding allocation between different housing initiatives, make it more streamlined for going through the process to develop affordable housing, coordinating across housing functions, and making it easier to implement housing policies within the city government. I can't say enough about how important it is to have people who are dedicated to not only working in the housing department or these other departments, but to coordinate across and to make sure that we're thinking strategically rather than just responsively about transactions and deals and specific projects. And I think this is the last section under where we live. And this is about equitable housing free from discriminatory lending, renting, property management, assessment, and appraisal practices. There are a couple of things that are included, and this entire section is new compared to the previous comprehensive plan. There are a couple of things that are important strategies to advance to support this as an outcome. One is maintaining renters' rights, protecting living conditions for renters. Two is convening a housing working group across sectors. So getting together with the universities, with employers, with other partners who play a role in the housing market to say, these are the issues that we see. How can our collective efforts work together rather than continue as they have been operating very separately? Third is to inspect and improve the city managed and subsidized properties and make sure that what housing is provided is of comparable or better quality than what's available on the private market. Doing fair housing assessments, making sure that we're up to date in terms of our complying with the federal requirements, or in many cases you need to kind of exceed them because the federal requirements are very minimal around fair housing. So working with Alachua County, who's the point of contact for that. Working with a property appraiser to identify where there might be disproportionate tax burden. There's a long history across the United States of appraisers, and you might have seen some of this in the news where you walk into an appraiser might walk into a home and the homeowner gets one valuation for their property, and in some cases they'll have somebody else, let's say a white friend, be the receiver for that process, and they'll get a much higher value for their home just because they've taken down the pictures of the Black family and they've replaced the interior of it. Or there are other subjective things that go into the property valuation process that should be identified as problematic practices and specifically addressed through public policy or other types of reforms and protections. And then the last thing here is continuing to support and expand legal services for things such as heirs property, eviction prevention, mortgage foreclosure intervention, down payment assistance, and making sure that these programs aren't just in operation, but that people know about them. If this is something that can help you, that you understand how to reach out and take advantage. And here we go into how we build. This section is more directly connected to land use and zoning and how we construct our city, how we oversee the development process in Gainesville. So in terms of where we are, actions and policies, including zoning laws, lending practices, investment decisions, they have historically favored those who have a vested interest, and it's overall been at the expense of others who haven't participated in the development approvals process. And so those types of policies have increased the racial disparity in homeownership, access to jobs, quality of education, quality of built homes, housing security. And it's incredibly important that we're resolving those disparities to make the city better, make the economy stronger, and a better place to live for everyone. So the first, North Star is that all Gainesville residents can enjoy living in equitable and complete communities, that all residents live in healthy communities that promote physical, mental, and social well-being. And third, all Gainesville residents experience a safe and inclusive urban environment. So in terms of living in equitable and complete communities, a couple of things that relate to our development process and what we're building across Gainesville. First is a strategy to assess our existing zoning, land use, overlay districts, and environmental designations to understand their ability to support the basic needs for residents in a community. So do our maps, does our zoning code actually provide the grounding that we need in order to ensure that this area develops in the way that supports our needs? Are we disabling things like grocery stores or parks or other resources that are absolutely necessary, as well as housing as a big need in those different neighborhoods? Our design standards in the land development code should create a more interactive development pattern. So we're third, creating policies and incentives that enable this design flexibility, that encourage compact design, that discourage sprawl, while at the same time addressing displacement explicitly. As the development of the city continues, we're creating complete communities that incorporate lots of different transit options. So people, again, aren't only connected to the rest of the city through their car. That we're making it easier, we're expanding opportunity for a diversity of housing types. We're incorporating language into the review criteria for amendments that requires an analysis of requests from an equity standpoint. So this is, again, an important process point that says, as development projects and proposals are coming in, that we're not only seeing that on its merits, but we're critically assessing, are we contributing to our housing crisis? Are we contributing to the disparity that we see? Is the way that this project's structured addressing our goals or not? And these last two, that we're requiring public facilities from developers, that we're asking for those community resources as other private investments continue, and that we're also supporting the innovation economy. So here, this is about healthy mental and social well-being. Making sure that we're amending the land development code to promote, incentivize, or require those standards, that we're conducting a community resilience assessment that includes looking at data such as educational attainment, unemployment rate. We're understanding, we're building a foundation of knowledge and understanding about who lives in our community and where are those disparities. And the third strategy is to make sure that new construction is built with materials that are meant to last for the long term and are also energy efficient, built to last, and resilient to extreme weather events or other stressors. And under this idea of a safe and inclusive urban environment, activating spaces in the built environment to create that livable experience, promoting a built environment with design standards that makes everyone feel comfortable. And that's things like benches, shading, signage, and reducing areas, risk areas in the public realm to make sure that people can walk around and bike safely. So with that, I'm going to pause before I go back to the beginning, if there are any questions or for some validation that I should back up and go to the first section, which again was how we learn.
Well, thank you very much. Andrew or Ms. Curry, is there anything you wanted to add at this point, or we just want to dive into commission questions and comments? Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the first chapter, and that is how we learn, and we'll start with Commissioner Ariola.
Nothing for this chapter, Mr. Mayor. I will have to put my notes into chapter order.
Okay, very good. Ms. Gainey? Oh, Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on the Neighborhood Education Center and what exactly is that? Is that one, or is that multiple ones, or what? That's kind of a new concept I haven't heard.
So I think Andrew and a couple of the staff have more of the details on the specifics here. I think there's an intention behind this idea of an education center where we are not, there's a goal here of increasing the transparency of the decision-making process around schools. And so where can that happen? Where is that housed? The second strategy is to do the outreach, but where is there a place where people can come that's run by a designated, city staff member, where people can ask those questions and get that understanding about this is, what's happening in our school system, what are the decisions that we are making together, and that they have a place to go to get that transparency in the decision-making process.
Okay, I mean, I guess we have no control over schools, and if we're if we're the ones running it, we have no control over it. I feel like it's going to lead to it might false expectations for the public, and I don't know if that's a better partnership with the school board or something like that. But that's just my one concern is we're setting false expectations because we have zero authority over that. The one other area, I think I was on page 7. We're talking about broadband. I don't think we have to call out that we want to do a partnership. I think it can be, we set a goal before that we wanted to make sure that all residents and businesses have access to high-speed, affordable broadband. So I don't think we have to call out as a partnership. Well, that's just our goal. There are many ways to get there, but I don't think it could be a partnership. It could not be a partnership. So that's one area I think we should change. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do have some concerns under how we learned there, very much like Commissioner Santos. But they kind of carry through several of these. I don't want us to make commitments to our residents that we have no legal basis for being able to support. And while the intent of everything here is phenomenal, my reading of much of the how we learn section is us making promises about things we can't engage in. We're not going to start our own school system. So we just, I want us to be very careful about the promises that we make, because as we see later on, when we talk about city government and the idea that all Gainesville residents will have clarity to understand how the city prioritizes, et cetera, we need to be exceptionally clear with ourselves and with our neighbors about what is actually possible from a legal standpoint. So I'm not going to pick apart individual things, but particularly in that how we learn section, it just feels like making promises for a government entity that we have no more control over than any other voter does. So I just want us to be really careful as we move forward with that. Thank you.
Commissioner Saka?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I saw the chapters recently, so it's nice to see the whole thing in one go and how they kind of flow in together. But on this first chapter, I do have similar hesitations, if only because we can coordinate till the cows come home, but at the end of the day of the school board, we have an understanding to do X, and the school board then decides to do Y. We can't force them to do it unless we go to court or arbitration, mediation. It's a process. So similar to my colleagues, I don't want to put in writing, we will definitely do X, because we can't guarantee that will happen. Even if we wanted to even if we had all the money in the world, even if we had all the staff in the world, we can't guarantee will happen, because that power resides with the school board. I can't even say we can provide affordable housing in neighborhoods near high-performing schools, because the school board can change where schools are. So it doesn't matter if we allow housing around current schools, the school board gets to decide where they build them and if they want to move them. And they've already done that once. I do think there are some things that definitely the city can do and should include in its plan, like providing transportation options and opportunities, making sure that we continue partnerships for after-school care for our students through parks, rec, and cultural affairs and other programs that we have, to make sure that we offer continuing education opportunities. Those are things we can definitely do. But I think anything related, I think directly to a public school, we can't promise to do, no matter how much we want to, no matter how much we fund for it. It's just, we don't have control over that. And I see Mr. Person coming up, so I'm gonna shut up.
Was there any other?
You got a couple more lights, but if you wanted to specifically respond to this.
Well, I just wanted to. I mean, I think the conversation is valid. I think some of the ideas that were expressed, I think are ones that have also been kind of talked about internally at the city with staff. I did want to point out, so we already have a public schools facilities element in our existing comprehensive plan. So we already address schools in our plan. This is not a new chapter, but I think one of the sort of overriding thought process when we went to tackle this chapter was the existing public schools facility element is really, it's just a regurgitation of our existing interlocal with the school board. And it's very much like sort of, it doesn't sort of address how critical schools are to everything else we're talking about with this. So I think from staff's perspective, we approached it as like, how can we make this existing chapter in our plan more responsive to everything else we're doing? And some of these things are absolutely outside of the city's direct control. But I do think that, like on the neighbor education center idea, I do think there could be a different way to approach it, perhaps like as a liaison role between the city or the school board and the school board. But this is an element that we have in the plan, and I think the attempt is to try to flesh that out and make it more than what it is today. So I think it's good feedback, but we're already in this space is what I wanted to convey.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Person.
Thank you.
Did I?
Commissioner,
Never mind.
you good?
Nope. I had another thing to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you concluded. Go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Persons. You're fine. You don't have to come back. You don't have to come back. We're good. So it's good to know that the chapter's already in like the old one. But I think it's kind of those conversations you say that you're having. You're kind of filtering through what more we can without going over, but definitely more than the stark skeleton that's currently there. And I'm all for those conversations and agreements with the school board. But I want to differentiate between those that are collaborations and those that are things that we can definitely do and dedicate our time and energy to. So I think moving forward as a constructive criticism, clear demarcation of which ones would be collaboration and which ones the city can just go and roll with. And I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to do a couple of things. First, address this, and then sort of ask a more general question about how you went about making some of the administrative points that you did throughout the presentation. But first, I want us to get back to the guiding vision of the comprehensive plan. We're the first in Florida to pursue a comprehensive plan that centers racial justice. And so with that is going to come a new look at a lot of the elements of the comprehensive plan, including the element on education. I think it would be a groundbreaking transformation for this government to revise interlocal and joint planning agreements with any number of these institutions if the centerpiece of the agreements is now what is guided in this comprehensive plan, talking about many of the issues that have been laid out. So I appreciate the realism from my colleagues that we cannot promise everything to everyone. I don't think that's what we're doing here, and that's not what I take away from this. What I take away from this is that this comprehensive plan is going to be the guiding light for this government for the next 10 years. And that guiding light is going to reflect in other governments and how we deal with them and how we work with them. And so I think that there's a lot to flesh out here, but I also think it's important that we don't back down from some of these more flighty things, because as we know, here in the state of Florida, bills are being filed right now in the state legislature you all say the school board's in control. Lately, it looks like the legislature and Ron DeSantis want to be in control of what gets taught in the classroom. So I think it's important that we at least give it a chance. And so that's my comment on that. Going back to the administrative points, I noticed that in a lot of these chapters, there are points and discussions about what the city government could do or what the city government would need to do in terms of capacity to address some of the outcomes that we want to reach. And I noticed that there were specific administrative recommendations for some. So for example, the housing coordinator position. I am interested to hear what kinds of thinking and what kinds of conversations are happening between staff and you all to determine which administrative recommendations you want to make for which of these goals. Because I'm going to tell you why I'm asking this question. I like the thinking. I like that you all are having those discussions. I know that this is a comprehensive plan and not necessarily internal policy or internal administration. But that's not a bad place to start. So kudos to you all for shipping on that block. And I just want to hear more of how that thinking is taking place as you shape these documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to Andrew and your team for a really impressive, innovative document. I hear my colleagues' concerns about what it is we may or may not have the jurisdiction to accomplish as a result of what the school board does. However, I do believe we have opportunities based on what we do as the city through our Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Department. So we do after-school programming, and we have the ability to complement or supplement what is or what is not happening in schools. I would love to see you flesh this out, given what our existing resources as the city that we already have. We have just recently stated that we're committing ourselves to bringing online a new cultural arts center. And so that will bring with it the opportunity for how we can live out how we learn. We know that the arts are an innovative and creative way to reach students in ways that currently our traditional school system may not be doing that. So I'd be very interested in seeing how we could take that way of thinking and put that into this comprehensive plan, because that is actually what we do. And we have some new folks on board over in our Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Department who I believe have some interesting ideas. I think we should take that work into consideration and figure out how we might be able to flesh out how we learn and do that as a city through this. I actually like this idea, but I believe taking a look at what we do and how we do it well can definitely be put into this. Thank you.
Thank you. I misinterpreted Commissioner Ariel as I thought he was giving you food for thought for sort of future. But if you're prepared to answer his question about sort of administrative and managerial roles and decisions at this time, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say there's probably stuff we missed. You know, I'll be completely honest. Like when we've been working on this and it has been, as I said, a lot of staff, diverse staff from different departments. And when we've sort of run across an issue that we see sort of on the inside, you know, internal to the organization, like, man, we really should be in this space, or this is like, you know, we can see those connections. Oftentimes, which is just, you know, a sort of normal part of like an organization our size, there's a gap in staffing, or there's a gap in resources or there's this would be like sort of tie a couple of different programs together. So we did try to surface some of those where we really kind of did come around or come together on consensus. Like the housing coordinator role is something I think that's like a good example of, my department does housing, we have housing and community development, but there's not sort of and GCRA is in housing, but there's not sort of an overarching like staff member who would sort of lead some of those coordination efforts. We've tried to do that. Like I said, there's probably areas where we missed or where they need a little bit more thinking. But I think as Lydia sort of indicated, one of the drivers of this plan is to be more sort of intentional about how this work is going to get done. We've been really kind of careful about not sort of using something you see in our existing plan where it talks about the city, like sort of generically, the city shall do this thing. Oftentimes, nobody's the city on that case. Like, that's talking about you. Like, well, that's not talking about you. And so we're trying to be much more intentional about identifying which parts of the city are going to be working on an issue. And in some cases where there's a gap or a blank, trying to identify that role or that position, even if that may be not sort of fully fleshed out to the nth degree, but just sort of a concept of this could be a position or this could be a function that we have.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Might I suggest you already have the answer in the documents, which is there are elements of the city that are generally not included in these comprehensive plan conversations.
Right.
You all are turning a lot of stones.
Right.
I would say this is now the time, and this is of course a recommendation to the manager. Now is the time to begin to sort of disseminate these chapters and this information, so that the organization can get involved and like you said from the very top, if you miss something, maybe there's somebody else who can pick up what you missed,
right,
and help you figure this all out. Because it is, what we just heard, all 50 pages of it, it is a significantly different city of Gainesville than what we have right now.
Yeah, I've had firefighters in meetings with me talking about comprehensive plan. It's like, cats and dogs living together. It's crazy. So it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I think I shared, well, look, from a very broad perspective, this is an aspirational document, and it's a legal document. I want us to push as far and to go as deep as we possibly can without going so far or pushing so hard that we devalue the document itself. Because if we include things in there that are unattainable, and we know going in they're unattainable, it devalues the rest of the comprehensive plan. So that is a very fine line that I think we're trying to walk. Now, there are ways to address that on the front end, that we go in and by the time we vote to approve whatever the final version is, we feel like this challenges our community deeply over the next decade. But if we work hard and work together and do things right, it is an achievable document. Okay, so that's the difficult, that's the gray, that's the shade that we're trying to get just right, right? So, I've, marked up this first one probably as much as any of them. When we say coordinate with the school board to ensure that all schools have a great learning environment or equitably distributed, so much of that is out of our control. However, I think if that remains a priority for our community, and I know why it's in there, it's because that's what our neighbors told us. Right? When we sat down, top of mind, top of list is going to be schools and the quality of my kid's school. And so if we're going to put it in there, then we have to be so committed to negotiating and memorializing a formalized agreement, whether it's an MOU or a joint planning agreement or whatever the mechanism is, that we have legally committed to one another on how we're going to help achieve that. And if that is our intention and what our next effort will be once this is approved, then I'm okay leaving it in there, because it means that we're not just saying it, but we're taking it seriously, and we're going to use whatever means we have to be able to achieve that. Otherwise, it belongs somewhere else. It's not that we don't think it's important and see its value, but it doesn't belong in the comp plan. So I look at number 1 and number 5. Number 5 is utilize school sites to contribute to the needs of families in the surrounding neighborhood. Love it. I mean, I think that's a big part of the discussion we had a week ago with what Duval could be. But again, the school board has, and the principals and everybody else, the staff that maintains the school grounds, they all have to be on board with that for it to work. And so again, that's going to take a legal agreement. You know, we're going to have to negotiate that, and it's going to have to be something that has some enforcement mechanisms to it. But then there's other things that clearly we can help with transportation. We can help with after and out of school time. And so I think if we approach this, and this is one of the more difficult ones, because we really are talking about something that is so critical to whether we're a great community or we're still trying to become a great community. So if we approach this talking to the school board or the county or whoever the partner will be, and say, look, you have goals and we have goals, and we can help each other achieve those. We can help you with learning outcomes because we know that these after and out of school programs will help improve learning outcomes. You're concerned about violence? We're concerned about violence. Here's some things we can do collaboratively to make sure that incidents that happen in the school don't spill out into the neighborhood. That when things are happening in the neighborhood, the folks at the school are aware and they can take preventative action before it becomes an issue at the school. Those are going to be difficult conversations. And I know several of my colleagues were part of our negotiations with the county to reestablish a joint planning agreement with them. And we got, like that tape at the end of the marathon was right there. Like we could just reach out, and then poof, it was gone. Like all that time, I mean, hundreds of hours of staff time and negotiations and public meetings to get to nowhere, to get nothing. So, I think we're going to have to, with things, especially in an element like this, we're going to have to be incredibly open to hearing what concerns these partner institutions and organizations will have and how we can help support them in their mission, but how it's also critical that they help support us in our mission if it's all going to work. I mean, that to me is we've all got to see that same sort of path forward. Now, I remain hopeful that we can do that, but we really have to be, I think, very transparent that just because we say it or put it in here doesn't mean that it's going to be achievable unless there's a lot of other pieces that fall into place. And I think we need to be explicit about this in this document, that this is a priority, and to achieve it, we also need these things to happen that are not necessarily under our authority or control. So as long as we can get those other pieces to join us, then yes, we remain committed to achieving this goal. So the same thing was on number 3. Like a lot of the first 4, I can see not our main responsibility, but the city can very much support all of those efforts with things that are our responsibility, and we just have to define and be clear what that support means, what those other organizations can depend on, what we need from other folks. Number 5 with the job skills for people in poverty. That's a perfect public-private partnership opportunity. Again, we can sort of be the leaders in that, but we're going to need other people to help support us. So, I think I'll say this sort of throughout the document. My greatest excitement and my most significant trepidation are over those parts of it that we know it's a priority. Our community continues to tell us it's a priority. We certainly have a piece of that responsibility, but in no way do we have all of it because we just simply can't. It's not, there's too many other things that have to happen to make it come to fruition. So we've got to just really be very, very open and honest about what those elements are. And I'm all about keeping them in there, but we need to keep them in there with a true assessment of what it'll take to accomplish. And I won't be so verbose with the rest of my comments and the other elements that I had questions about. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I told you earlier, I'm going to have to leave in just a couple of minutes. But what I'm going to say about this holds true throughout the entire document. Following up on what the mayor just said, this is an aspirational document. It is also a legal document. We need to be clear about which pieces are which. The things that we want to happen and that we believe must happen and that we are absolutely committed to working on, but that we can't promise, we've got to be clear that we can't promise it. There are things we absolutely can promise because our charter says we can and statute says we can. But the things that are not ours to promise, we must not promise. We must say, we want this to happen, and we want to join arms with our other government entities and with our community and make these things happen. But if we put on the legal side of the document that we're going to do this and we can't do it, then we have promised people in our community that we're going to do something that we're going to fail at. There is nothing worse we can do than make promises to our neighbors knowing that we may or may not be able to fulfill those promises. That further breaks faith in government, and that is something we cannot and must not do. Communications is almost always the most important piece of any document, of any effort, and often the last thing we think about in an effort. If we are very, very clear throughout what is aspirational and what is a promise, what is legal, we'll be fine. But if we soapbox this, we'll be okay for the next few months, couple of years. But at some point, somebody's going to come back and say, the city promised us this and it didn't deliver. And shame on us if we get to that point. So let's make sure that what we're promising is what we can deliver. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's go on to the second full chapter, which is cultural identity. I just put a big heart at the top of this one. I love it, love it, love it, love everything in it. This is certainly a new approach that we're taking in this, and it has so much value to it. So anybody have any constructive criticism they wanted to offer for anything in this element? Again, I think it's one of those things where we have a lot more control over how we approach this than public education, so it was a little easier, I think, to get my mind around. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really like this chapter as well, and I honed in on number 2, the strategy. Historic assets with cultural value are preserved based on, did you move me? I don't see it anymore. Was it the page before? No, well, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Historic assets with cultural value are preserved based on community values. That one resonated with me particularly because I worked at the Aquin Jones Museum and Cultural Center. And that was a project that the city of Gainesville, through what was then the CRA, now the GCRA, pulled together. And such an important thing to do, has resonated in the hearts and minds of both Black, white, and other folks who have stopped by what is becoming an institution. I would like to say this. We understand on a very basic level how important the need is to preserve history, but there's another level as well too as we move forward on projects like this, and hopefully we'll find other ways, because there certainly are other sites that should definitely be preserved. There are guidelines, standards, protocols, etc., that as we move forward, we should definitely be mindful of if we're going to consider them official cultural facilities. I will go into just a little detail about the Aquin Jones Museum because I know this from working there. It is outstanding. It is a house with some things in it that don't belong to us. And so as we move forward, I think making sure that we lay the appropriate framework to create our institutions is something that we should be very, very intentional about. I think our staff had been wonderful in what the idea and the intention was, but I think it's not really work that we did. That's not what CRA does, but they saw a need. They saw a house falling into the ground. They knew that there was an important history that was attached to it. They listened to the community and they responded. All of that is excellent. I will simply say that as we move forward, there is an entire body of work that goes into that preservation piece and the creation of those types of institutions. And I look forward to us digging into that work because there are not just Black houses, but I'm sure there are other types that should be preserved in that way as well. So let's look at the professional aspect of cultural preservation when we look at building our institutions as well. I'm not sure how that would fit into this document, if it would at all, but it certainly needs to become a part of our work as we move forward on continuing to preserve our historic assets.
Excellent, thank you. I think we had Commissioner Santos, correct?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you all for the great work on all of these, all the staff and HRNA. I really do appreciate it. One of the things I think we should set for a goal is I believe that we should set a goal of having a world-class cultural and art system. I think that's one of the goals we should set. The city librarian, I think we should expand that beyond just stories from the neighbors, but also preserving like our city's history. We produce a credible amount of documents and things like that, and what do we keep and not keep, and what I think though that's an important portion that kind of gets lost, and we hold the city's history, but what I think I've talked to the clerk about this too, kind of a city historian and stuff like that. So I like for us to consider expanding that not just on kind of what we hear from neighbors, but also like what the city produces and all of everything that comes with that. And then also when looking at activities, and I might have missed this, but one of the biggest things that I feel like that we hear is that there are activities for kids, there's activities for older adults, but there's not activities for like younger people. And that's one of the biggest issues we have in our community as well, is kind of filling those gaps. So I think making sure that we have activities and cultural activities for all ages, and especially ones who are like asking for those activities. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, how we get around. Also love this. I just want to point out, this phrase appears a couple times, but it's so important, and this is one of those new approaches, not new to us. You're seeing this a lot more with organizations, both corporate and public, but focusing on disaggregated data and disaggregated analysis. That's so important. It's harder to do. It's sometimes not available, so it's frustrating. But instead of, whatever, you say you look at median income in a census tract, that can be so deceiving. We always like to point out one of the poorest census tracts or zip codes is Sorority Row. And we know that that's not actually the case. So by disaggregating our data and then basing decisions that are rooted in equity for things like transportation is such a new approach, but going to add so much value to the policymakers when they're making decisions about where to put resources and how to align our services with the people that actually need them the most. So I was glad to see that kind of come up repetitively throughout the different elements. You wanted to talk about that? Andrew?
I couldn't resist the as a data nerd. That is actually something that we talked about really extensively, sort of across all the chapters. But Laura Gretz and I, we talked about that particularly on the our government chapter, because that was one of the things that I think in discussing like how do we measure our success with this plan. We have to develop first a shared sort of framework of what type of disaggregated data that we need to collect as a city, and then come up with a data strategy that we're doing that consistently when we go out, when we do community events, so we can really kind of standardize that across the organization. Because everybody, the entirety of the organization goes out and does data collection for a variety of reasons. But having a standardized approach and making sure that we have that will enable us to use that data across the organization to inform decisions, even for departments that maybe didn't go out and collect that data. And that will also reduce the amount of sort of survey fatigue that sometimes our citizens get when we go out and ask them time and time again the same sort of questions. So I'm glad you pointed it out. It is a really important part. It is something that we've talked about extensively and wanted to include in this plan. So
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Persons. And I'll just add one more thing to that. As long as we can anonymize it, then we can make that data open, and that means that any organization can get that and use it to community benefit. And that's easy to do. I mean, I'd say it's easy to do. I couldn't do it, but I know that there are people that do that kind of work that it's pretty easy to anonymize it and then open source it and create a lot of value for that. So anyway, I just want to point that out. And then I did want to point out in number two, the second outcome for strategy, require new development to fund improvements, including pedestrian bike infrastructure and that sort of thing. That's not new, and that's not like, out there progressive or anything. It's just pretty normal. But we have to have some mechanisms that actually, there's too many ways to like get around that, and kind of say you did it, but not really doing it. And I remember a few years ago, there was a project going up, and based on the number of units and square footage and all that, they were required to put up, X number of bike parking spaces. Let's say it was 50. And they said, we have no way we have room for 50 bike parking spaces or bike racks or whatever, Look at the footprint. There's just nowhere we can put them. And I said, great, put them elsewhere around the city, like put them all around downtown, because we have a huge shortage of bike parking, all around the city. So just put 5 here, 10 there, and do it that way. But there was no mechanism for us to require them to do that. So it was either give them an exemption on their project and not get the parking spaces, bike parking, or just not let the project go forward, right? And so with things like that, we are going to, and I mean, this is going to be a staff level challenge. When we say, it's easy to say in the comp plan that this is required, but we've got to come up with 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that can be required, so there's not these sort of natural barriers that spring up that just make it either impossible to build the housing for families or the the commercial space or whatever. So I mean, I just kind of say up front that I know that we run into that kind of frequently, and the more upfront we can sort of accommodate that, so it keeps things moving slowly, and the entire community gets the benefit from whatever the improvement is, then the better it works for everybody. Environment. Anybody have any thoughts on environment? Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm very glad to see that that the idea of the changing climate is going to be included for the first time. That science is about 50 years old now, but America is just coming around to it. I would like for us to explore more of the possibilities of the concept of energy positive buildings. I have a former classmate of mine who is doing great work in Boston, working on some energy positive homes. And what an energy positive building means is that that building actually generates more energy than it uses. I'm not going to pretend to understand all of the technical aspects of such a construction, but we know it's possible. And so I'd like for our city to consider how we can incentivize that type of a building, and where that falls in the comprehensive plan, I will leave to the bright minds that are working on it already. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jesus.
Thank you, Mayor. I had some points on how we get around.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, apologize.
Yeah. I'd like for us to add in that the city will build a multi-use creek greenways throughout the city, and the city will purchase or gain rights and easements for property along the creek to both protect it for environmental reasons, but also for future public use. I think we should put in there that bike lanes should be protected bike lanes when installed. Also, we should put in there that when roads are resurfaced, that we do a Vision Zero look at it and see how we can make changes to that road, adding in bike lanes or other Vision Zero priorities on that road. But whenever we do a resurfacing, that is looked at every time. Also, on street lighting, I think we should put in there the street lighting should be improved and the codes should be changed to allow lighting to promote safe areas that fit with the urban form and the zoning of the area. We should be updating our level of service documents, because when you look at our neighborhood surveys concerns, one of the top concerns is lighting. And I think it probably meets our current level of service, but I don't think our current level of service meets what our residents want. So I think that's something that we should be in there as well. And I think we should also consider putting in that we have a goal of at least 15-minute headways on major bus routes. And then we also have a goal of during kind of the core hours of at least having no routes that have longer than 30-minute headways. And I can jump to the environment one. That's
sure.
So on the environment, I think we should add in that we have a goal of having a world-class park system. And then this whole section here, more so than any other sections, but it really separates GRU and the city. It even talks about the city partnering with GRU. And the same sentence says like city and GRU. So we can't like partner with ourselves, and we have a kind of one city vision. So I think this section is just kind of a fine-tooth comb of the wording between city and GRU and how that's used. And then when it comes to, I think this is talking about using the Connect Free program to connect existing homes to GRU water and sewer. And then it says on a voluntary basis. I don't think we have to mandate this voluntary. There may be times where we want to do it on a or it's really for the best environmental reasons and other reasons to do it on non-voluntary and to run those lines. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am not sure whether this would most appropriately fall underneath our environment or how we get around, but we recently had a conversation when we were talking about really kind of taking a deeper dive into the master planning process of our parks, making sure that pedestrians can get to and from safely, remembering baby Dylan and the unfortunate tragedy of him just trying to cross the road to get to the park. So I'd like to see us add that master planning process of our parks and our facilities, et cetera, at some point, whether it might go underneath the how we get around portion, but I really would like to see that master planning portion included in this.
Yeah, very good. I think definitely is how we get around, whether it's to a park or a school
sure.
or a shopping center. It's about how we move, absolutely. So we can.
Thank you. I also had, and I apologize because I was caught up in what everybody else was saying and enjoying it. This kind of takes us back just a little bit, back up to the art and culture piece, if you don't mind. If I'm not mistaken, I saw and heard mention of a community archive, which always gets my juices flowing. That's amazing. One of the things that I will be particularly concerned about should we embark upon this, obviously, is not just centering the community, but making the community's intellectual property something that they own. We can easily go back to a situation that the city had just a few years ago where there were some intellectual property faux pas, let's say it that way. that we don't want to see again. We want to make sure that if we as a city embark upon what I think could be an amazing, amazing project, that how that intellectual property is archived and the ownership piece of it is something that we pay particular close attention to. I remember Assistant City Attorney Lisa Bennett was quite helpful in providing some information and some insight, but it was we became very aware quickly as we tried to help resolve this intellectual property issue with the residents of Fifth Avenue, that we just didn't have the capacity to do that at the time. So a community archive is a very big undertaking that requires a large, it's a heavy lift, and it requires us to take a look at it from a lot of different perspectives. It's not just give us your story, because we understand that people monetize those stories. And what we want to make sure we're doing is not creating more confusion and issues with the same communities that have been disproportionately impacted. How can we serve them? How can this archive become beneficial to the people whose story it's telling? I'm hoping and looking forward to us paying close attention to and being very intentional about as we deal with the intellectual property piece for an archive. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Zucker?
Mr. Mayor, so I'm gonna point to number 7 back on our environment, if we can. So outcome strategy 1, issue 7. Thank you. So I'm all for it. I think more than once I've been up here saying, how do we get our literal neighbors in government to kind of adopt mutually beneficial policies on many issues. But I think our environment is the one where we really can't budge. If someone's dumping oil into the aquifer just outside the city lines or the county line, it's gonna get into our water anyway. So I think that's one that I really want us to stress on. I think it goes back to the first chapter of we can't really promise more than we'll try to establish to coordinate those strategies. But I think that's an important first step that we at least try. I'm gonna get in a weird soapbox that I normally never do. We have one planet, and there's one Florida, and it's a very delicate ecosystem. And the water for the city's utility comes from the ground that relies on that environment being healthy. And if our literal neighbors could act in a way that's less than healthy for that environment, it will impact every single person in this city connected to our water system. And I've said this the other day, civilizations lived without electricity for millennia, whatever. If you didn't have water though, you died. So if the environment's a big thing. If in these coordination talks, we have to whittle it down. I think my priority would be on that issue of water. We provide water for more than just Gainesville. We provide water. Do we also provide water to Alachua? Yeah, I think it's Alachua. I get the 2 A's mixed up. But it's not just our city at that point. It's everyone else. And I think that's a good place to start that conversation as we look for those colleagues at the municipal level. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Back to Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My mind fell to my constituents in Porter's Quarters who have reached out to me on numerous occasions about the sound from Argos, about the dust from Argos and how it is negatively impacting children and adults who have asthma, et cetera, and a number of other concerns. And so as I think about our environment, our lived environment where people are trying just to carry out a certain quality of life where they live, I am wanting us to really kind of look at the ways that we can address how our neighbors' quality of life is impacted by surrounding businesses. I got some phone calls just last week about the noise that was keeping people up until 2 o'clock in the morning. So as we look at our comprehensive plan, how we develop our communities in the future, obviously, but also how we take a look at the existing communities, and that is a historically Black community. If we're framing this document around racial equity, that is something that we cannot ignore. That community has been voicing those concerns to us for quite some time, so I'm really looking forward to us being able to address that and other concerns very much like that in the very near future. So thank you very much in advance, Andrew and your team, for taking a look at that in a very real and tangible way as to how we can address that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to health and well-being. Anybody have any questions or comments on health and well-being? Hey, Mike, yeah.
Do you guys have a section for public comment, or can anybody just walk up? I didn't really see it in the
Once
agenda.
we get through, which we're getting pretty close, then we're going to open up for public comment.
Okay, my
Yeah.
apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Okay, so I'll start. For health and well-being, on the first outcome, the first 5 strategies, I mean, this is definitely new space for the city. GFR has provided some level of healthcare through EMT services historically. Gainesville Police provide emergency aid and response. But getting into significant provision of health services, which we have certainly done with the Community Resource Paramedic Program, with our sort of visioning of future fire stations having walk-in clinics, even through vaccinations and that sort of thing. This is a critical 10 years for that. And what we decide to do as part of the normal course of business for the city versus what we should do to support in partnership with other healthcare providers whose main mission that is going to be a very important discussion. And so I look at those first 5 strategies. It really seems to me like that's an opportunity to create formal partnerships with Santa Fe, like the nursing program, UF Health, their dental program, the Alaska County Health Department, to accomplish those things without the significant challenge of building up our capacity ourselves. So that is going to be a really difficult discussion that we need to have. And I want whatever we put in this document, again, to be achievable and realistic. I absolutely believe that it's important for us to get into the healthcare space. I mean, we're just growing to a city of such a size and complexity that we know our neighbors, we know what their needs are. And I think in many cases we can be the best ones to respond to those. But once we start getting into the core mission of what other healthcare providers do, it's going to make it worse. Like, it's going to make it more complicated, more expensive, just more difficult. So finding the ways that we can align people with care and sort of be that connecting agent versus where we should be directly providing care is something that I'm going to need to have a lot deeper discussions about. So that was my big concern or takeaway from that. Commissioner Sacco and then Hey Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is one chapter that I was especially excited to see, and I think it's for a couple of the reasons that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor. With your CRP program, we've definitely kind of, not even a toe, but like we've thrown our foot in the water at that point, and we're kind of marching into that lake. Hopefully with this we'll have a boat. So one thing that I definitely want to see kind of promote here is, as you said, how we support those programs already. So through CRP, we are able to build out, professional capacity. Like, I can go out and actually do something labor capacity. But that seems to be only, that has a limited extent. I think another thing that we need to look at, other than, deliberately but slowly building out that capacity at CRP is how we support those programs that already do this. So I think it's considerably cheaper and much more efficient, we've learned, to let experts do what they're doing. And if we can support their work already, and I mean this through nonprofits, I mean this through UF's health system as they try to build on the east side, they already know kind of what they're doing. How do we help you do that so that you can further that mission? Because I think it would take a lot longer for all of us up here to become doctors and go out and start a practice than helping someone who's already doing health work or mental health work continue that practice in communities that need it most. I will say that I like how the environmental aspects that are integrated into this one. I forgot where we heard it, but it was the green spaces promote health, like mental health. Someone spoke about it a couple weeks ago when they were presenting. But I will mention that when I go to visit my parents in Miami, when I look around, I'm like walking the dog, whatever, I'm taking a walk in the neighborhood, I feel extra stressed out. I look around a couple times and it always strikes me, there are no trees. It is literally just cement and asphalt everywhere. And then I'll go into a neighborhood street that actually kept all their trees, literally 2 roads down, and it feels like a different world altogether. It feels safer, it feels much more soothing. I'm not anxious the whole time compared to a road that, we've kind of bulldozed everything and put concrete over it. So I do think living consistently in that environment, as Commissioner Duncan Walker said, if this is the environment you're in and day out, that takes a toll on you. So I think I really appreciate including kind of environmental factors in this, making sure that the parks being accessible and nearby is part of that. I think we noticed, especially during COVID, that as soon as it was kind of okay to be outside of your house, people went straight to parks. Like, where is there a nice green space that I can just sit in the sun for a minute and veg? And that was something that people desperately wanted. And that is very squarely in our wheelhouse. So parks, nature, very easily what we do. When looking at other ones, where is it? I saw it earlier. Which number is it? Yeah. So the supporting mental health programs, I think one of especially for those impacted by the criminal justice system, in order to break the cycle of recidivism, I think one that we also need to do, and we've been much better at it, is in the criminal justice system overall, making sure that there are options, I want to say post-incident options for everyone. So whether that be through our victims advocate units that go out and do amazing work to make sure it's not just, well, you gave us your speech and you gave us your testimony, now we're good. We follow up and make sure people are okay, that they have what they need. If it's a victim's family, what do you have? What do you need? How can we continue supporting you? Crime doesn't, it's not in a vacuum. So any violence or incident or any traumatic incident like that doesn't just go away because the day has passed or the report was taken by the officer. So I think including that, I guess I would say amplifying that to include more than just focusing on recidivism. I think focusing as well on survivors of violence and families of victims, I think really points to some of the issues that we've been having lately, to make sure that we, one, break that cycle, but it's not necessarily recidivism, just the cycle of violence overall. And I've rambled, but thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. This is on outcome 4, strategy 3, provide free smoke alarms to all residents. I think we should maybe clarify, not maybe to all residents, but just to ones who are in need. Providing smoke alarms to every single house that can get very expensive. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Ariola?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Sacco's comments jogged something in my mind. I just want us to be sure that we are differentiating between access to healthcare and then healthcare providers. There's the Alachua County Healthcare Safety Net Collaborative, which meets just about every month, and there's 20 or so different safety net providers, none of which are the University of Florida, that join that. So I just want us to be aware that there's a huge difference between providing healthcare and a huge difference between how someone accesses healthcare. And I'm glad that that word access is used in there, and I just want to make sure that we are engaging that safety net collaborative for these discussions. Thank you.
Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I heard it in the presentation a little earlier, and I don't see it right now, but I am concerned about our team here. When we think about our health and well-being, it's great that we are facing outward and we're looking at the needs of our community, but I'm also very, very concerned about internally what our staff's needs are. This is hard work. And from the impacts of COVID to the impacts of change to just day-to-day stuff, I recognize that we have an incredible team who gives us everything. They sit up in here in meetings till 2 o'clock in the morning with us. They make sure that this city functions from day to day. They take care of the grounds, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot that goes into doing that. It's thankless work. The paycheck could never be enough. I am particularly interested in how our health and well-being stretches to cover the team here at the city. Is that currently in this document? Andrew, can you speak to that? Did I hear that earlier?
No, but I think it's an excellent point.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
thought I heard it somewhere. Okay, all right. So I'll wait to get to that, but I had to say that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if you'll indulge me, Carissa Raskin from Strategy, thank you. She actually turned us on to the Safety Net Collaborative group. And so we had a really great meeting with them talking about this chapter. And they provided us a lot of really great feedback that we incorporated into it. So I did want to give a shout out to Carissa for connecting us with them.
Thank you. Commissioner Sacco?
Mayor, sorry. I kind of really love this one. So one thing that I failed to mention earlier, in that first chapter when we talk about kind of that education hub, that education center, I think this is another area that could make good use of something similar. If only, I know you've all experienced this. People think we have a lot more control over things than we actually do, and that we're in charge of everything. That's like definitely not my lane. But that's who you think of. Like, I'm going to call the city, or I'm going to call my mayor. And I'm sure the mayor gets a lot of these, more than we do. But I think knowing for all of these resources, having them housed somewhere, just like our archive and our history and our art, having it archived and housed somewhere that is accessible to the public, that is frequently updated, and making sure that those resources are just there. Because I can't imagine the keyword combination to pump into Google if I'm needing something. But if the city, has community resources as a tab somewhere on a website, if you can call up and say there is someone in the CRP department program, it's not department, there's a difference, program that can, walk you through some of these options if you do need issues with if you need assistance with mental health, with diabetes, with mobility. Here is, a repository of all those resources, and we can definitely do that. I think one of the easiest things we can do is house information. We already do it for sunshine reasons. We can house more information, and I think that's one that could be squarely in our lane, kind of as that hub for the city and all the nonprofits and all of our own internal resources. So there's one that I didn't see in here, and I was going to bring it to GPC at some point, but I figured since we're here, one thing that for about a couple of years now, that I am personally very much an advocate for is gender-specific health and well-being. So I know that we were looking at racial equity as well, but I think there's a huge health disparity between genders and how you identify and how you present. So I think making sure that we are doing the most to promote accessibility regardless of gender or how you present, is important. And I will get to my GBC point in a second. The city of Ann Arbor, that I hold close and dear to my heart, 2 months ago passed an ordinance in their city requiring that all publicly accessed restrooms must provide free menstrual products. That is a huge leap for women's health and for the health, I'm not gonna correct myself, not women's health, for people who the health of people who menstruate, because it's not just women. And I think making sure that we are inclusive of all of those movements and those not readily represented needs in the community. It's an issue with low-income communities. Studies have shown, I think it was a 2019 study showed that 2/3 of low-income households struggle with access to this. That is a health issue. That is a well-being issue. That is a mental health issue. That students from low-income families especially have those issues, that our homeless population has that issue. So if that could be thrown on how we can further promote gender-specific health, I would be very grateful, and we will talk further at GPCs in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Ariola?
I just wanted to second that.
Thanks. I know it's a lure to use this format to start getting into the many exciting and creative ideas that all of us have ourselves or have heard from our neighbors. But I also want to remind everyone, this is a very high level strategic document. It's not a specific program, sort of tactical plan. And so I want us to hopefully keep our feedback to our team on the sort of high level sort of elements and strategies, and we'll have lots of time to get into like specific programmatic opportunities or tactical steps that will help us achieve those things. Because I want them to take whatever they hear from us today and be able to really implement that and operationalize it so they can bring us back a document that we can approve, and also something to go back out to our neighbors there that's not so in the weeds that they start not quite knowing what it's about. But you, of course, are all welcome to share whatever thoughts you have. Commissioner Sacco?
I'll apologize for getting too far and too excited, though. But yeah,
No
that's
apology necessary.
I think that's why I phrased it as just looking at gender-specific health, and at least making sure that lens is being applied. If you like my idea, that's great. If you have other ideas from the community, even better. But yeah, the main goal is making sure that lens is applied. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, on to how we work. Any comments or questions about how we work? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, in being a former employee here at the city, I've been through the evaluation process. And I have sat at lunch and had conversations with my colleagues who had been disheartened by the process. It's one thing to not get an evaluation that you don't like, or perhaps you expect what you get on it, but it's something different when your evaluation is simply from the top down. And so one of the things as I think about how we work and how we can possibly make our workplace more equitable is considering allowing our employees to also be able to evaluate their managers and their supervisors, a 360-degree evaluative process. So now we're not just talking, in my mind, I'm envisioning this creating a healthier workplace culture, because now we're giving voice
Sorry,
to...
I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
No, thank you. Okay. How do I prevent that from happening again? I didn't touch anything. But what I envision is creating a situation where now our employees are empowered and they feel as though they have a voice, their voice can be heard, because our evaluation process right now is your manager sits down with you and they tell you about your performance. How do we at the top know how our managers are interacting or performing in terms of how our staff feels if we don't give them the opportunity to speak? So I think part of equity in this would involve more of a 360-degree evaluative process for our team. And I'd love it if we could explore that idea and make that a part of the way that we do business and show appreciation for everyone who works for us here at the city.
Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. I just have my notes. I think one of the things in how we work, I'm not sure if this is in here or not, but I don't think it is, zoning that allows businesses to be near where people live, and then promote mixed use when there is new developments. We, in many parts of our city, I mean, the whole southwest portion of our city, we don't allow businesses near one of the probably most densely populated portions of our city, down on Archer Road south there, where all the students are. So that's one of the things I would like for us to consider as part of this is, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I had I don't know, an issue with the first strategy, encourage businesses to pay a living wage. I don't like putting like stuff like that in the comp plan. You know, we get to stand out there with our pom-poms and our what are the vuvuzelas or whatever the South African horn is, and say, you can do it, you can pay a living wage. We until we can pass a living wage, until we have that authority from the state where we can create a local minimum wage or living wage, then it's that's that expectation we create where we can't follow through. So we can do that. We've done that, but I don't like putting in things like encouraged to do something. We either do it or we don't do it. And then under outcome 2 strategy, well, 2 and 3, identify opportunities to attract target employers to neighborhoods, you know, needing job opportunities. I'm just going to say this is really the rest of the plan. The best incentive we can provide for businesses to either relocate here or to grow and then stay here is to have a vibrant city with great schools, great culture, and great natural amenities. That's what makes businesses want to locate. It's not tax rates, it's not utility rates, it's a great city. So the best incentive if we want to attract and retain businesses is having a great city. And then finally, identify gaps in skills and training amongst communities underrepresented in certain industries. Again, I think the role that we can help play in that is the identifying the gaps, and then we can align them with already existing programs, you know, from especially Santa Fe that can help fill those. Again, we don't have to like get into that sort of realm. Okay. Not seeing any other lights. Our city government. Anybody have any input on that? Commissioner Ariola. I'm sorry, Sacco.
Cool. No, I think one here, it goes back again to that kind of education hub where strategy 1, all Gainesville residents have clarity and resources to understand how the city does anything. I think overall, there's a lot that happens that I think sometimes even we don't understand because we haven't been here 100 years to see the rise and fall of many a program. But I think, which again, that education component of our history and saying, you know, this is how we got where we are would be helpful. But I think that first strategy is making sure that there is an ever-present, routinely updated communication or resource. I don't know if it's printed, I don't know if it's digital, but resource that explains our process. This is how things go to the Development Review Board. This is what by right development is. This is what we do with the environment and our tree mitigation. So there's a lot of things that folks want to be really involved in, want to be civically engaged, but it's a hard system to just kind of jump into. I know. I'm sure Commissioner Duncan Walker would agree. It's a fire hose to drink from. The first day you get here, the average person balancing a job and children and everything else, trying to tune in on something that sounds like they're interested in, but they show up and they don't know. They don't know where to get that information. And I think making that for me is a great priority. Just making it as accessible and as layperson friendly as humanly possible. Be that with words, shapes, graphs. I don't know. I don't care. But I want our community, the whole community, to be engaged. And I that is a matter of literacy, of time of day, of mobility access. I want to make sure that those people are able to be engaged. And it's not just the same, 15, 20 people on every issue. I want to see a complete sea of different people in this room every time we have a different object, a different item. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. On this one, I think we should highlight the push for the city to have a one city approach and kind of one voice as a city. We have more charter officers than any other city that I've found in the country. And kind of a statement in there that we're moving towards centralizing, removing kind of duplicate positions, programs, departments across all of the charters. And that I think we should also state that shared services should be housed under the city manager. I have a question on strategy 1, and it's talking about allocating 2 hours per week of staff time in all departments. Is that 2 hours per week of every single staff member for the city? Or is that just like at a department level?
Mr. Mayor, no, I think the intent, and this is a little bit of a distillation, is there are departments that do a lot of outward-facing work, and this is something we've sort of talked about at different points. I have wonderful staff. I have great planners, great code officers. Some of their work happens after hours, and it has to just be sort of recognized and prioritized so that when push comes to shove, us issuing a permit is just as important as going to a neighborhood meeting to talk about, an issue or to listen. And so that's what we're sort of trying to address here, to make sure that basically non-project related outreach and engagement is budgeted and planned for, so that we can go, or I can go to a neighborhood meeting, not because I'm asking, hey, we're doing this thing, what do you think, but just be there as a resource, answer any questions, build relationships with neighborhoods, that kind of thing, to try to actually recognize that. And a lot of that work is already occurring in the city. It just sometimes goes sort of under the radar.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I definitely support that aspect, and maybe it needs a little more clarity in it. I just want to make sure. I mean, there are certain positions that are outward facing; they should communicate, but not every position we should do that in the city. And then one other thing I think we should add into this, I don't know if this is the right section or not, but I think we should add that the city will proactively work to annex areas inside the urban boundary that has been set aside for Gainesville by county voters in the most recent county charter change. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Ariola?
Thank you. I very much like the content in this one. I thought, I don't know if this was under this section or a later one, when there was a bullet point about auditing long-term contracts and major supplier agreements. While I think that is a fantastic idea for organizations of our size to do from time to time, I don't know exactly where that falls in the comprehensive plan. It seems to me as though that would be something handled by our internal auditor. Just thought I'd just mention that.
Mr. Mayor, I did want to point out, only because I think we maybe inelegantly use the term audit as in like the auditor, but I think what we're really sort of referring to here is more of like a QA/QC process, or something that's like sort of being evaluated at the charter level, not necessarily something that would be An audit from our auditor's office.
A review.
Yes, exactly.
Whether it was elegant or not, it was impactful. I very much value the input from our internal auditor, and I do think that could, obviously, we'd have to be narrow in our scope. We don't want to just say, hey, just go and review every single thing. But I think there's a role that her office can play in that sense. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Bigby?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Yes, we'll definitely take a look at that. There's a lot more information that needs to be discussed, and we haven't had any input into this yet. So we're going to meet with Andrew and his staff. There is some audit work in progress already that is addressing some of this, and we'll determine where the risks are and areas that still need to make it to the audit plan. And we're just getting ready to update our audit plan in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Bigby. I had two things. So, I mean, really, I think this is for the charters in whatever final form this takes. But you bring up again interlocal and joint planning agreements. Those are nice to think about. They're like, boy, if we could just get at this interlocal or this JPA, what wonderful work we could do together. But again, it takes 2 or 3 or 4 to make that dance happen. What I would like to see in the comprehensive plan final draft is those areas, but for an interlocal or a JPA or something like that, we cannot possibly accomplish this goal. And I hope I'm making clear the differentiation. It doesn't mean we don't pursue other joint agreements or MOUs or whatever, but there are certain things that we cannot possibly accomplish these community goals without a formal alignment with the county or the school board or someone else. And so if we can bifurcate those and kind of really just focus on the ones that are mandatory, that would help me a lot. And I think it will help future commissions to know what they need to focus on in their agreements. The other thing I think that we need to add, I'm absolutely 100% convinced we need to add to our city government is language access, making that an explicit strategy. So that becomes just part of what we do as an organization and any new program, anything like that. Okay, where we live. Almost, Mike, I promise we're almost there. You're so patient. I'm going to give you a gold star. Okay, I'll start. I had a bunch, mostly positive, so don't get too worried. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, the one with encourage University of Florida Santa Fe to develop student housing on their campuses, sure, but I don't think we should say, I think it should be on and off their campuses. If they are building housing, that is good for our community. So I don't care if it's on or off or some combination. The more housing they build, the more pressure it takes off of the rest of the private market. So I'd like to add that one little word. We got to be very careful, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but when we say enhance existing underserved neighborhoods that lack conveniences such as healthcare, grocers, transit, recreation, on and on, when we start, use my words carefully. When we start taking actions that encourage things like healthcare, grocers, transit, recreation, entertainment to certain neighborhoods, that will be a displacement pressure. It will encourage other people who have resources and means to want to live in that neighborhood and will threaten displacement of existing neighbors. We have to be very conscious of that and be very strategic with our anti-displacement efforts that we have been developing on a parallel track. Because that all sounds good. And, you know, when we go talk to our neighbors or go door to door, they say, well, I wish we had all these things. I know you do, but once those things come, that's when you start seeing significant displacement pressures. I won't go through. There's a bunch of others I just had like in big red letters, yes, that I love with this. And I just want to point out under outcome 2 strategies 5 and 6 with our regulatory reforms and inclusionary zoning. I mean, we're going through that again on a parallel track, and that's so critical to getting more housing, more diverse housing, and more housing more evenly spread throughout our community. So, you know, I think that we're in a good position for that. Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think along the similar lines of your displacement pressure point. So on, hold on, I can figure this out. Page 43. So on outcome 2, number 9, I think the racial equity component is important. Fact, like that is a statement. But I think, and we've said this before, anytime we make a requirement another permit, another analysis, another review that any development has to go through, it makes it that much less affordable. And then the very next slide on outcome 3.6, we want to streamline affordable housing. So what I want us to make sure that we do is that we find the very fine line and walk it as straight as we can, because that will be a tug of war to make sure that we create housing, make it as quickly as possible, make sure it's available without displacing people, with making sure that there is cultural and racial equity and sensitivity to the location and the folks there. But I don't want them to be competing. But it is as presented here a little contradictory of streamline it, but also make sure we add all these other reviews. I have faith in our staff that they will figure out a way to do that, but it is something that in the original presentation really caught my attention as you add to all of those while you try to streamline. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I think when the city's making land use and zoning changes, one of the things to consider is the lower per capita greenhouse gas emissions, and on doing it on a per capita basis, versus where that development happening somewhere else in the urban sprawl or a lower density on that same site. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that in at least one previous conversation with Andrew and your staff, we have discussed the term equitable development, and I believe that it's used a few times in the document, and I really appreciate that. What I would like to see us do is actually arrive at what that means to us. What is Gainesville's definition of equitable development? I believe I posed that to staff before, but I think as we look at where we live and how our communities grow, that's going to be critical. And it'll help to inform the work. It'll help to inform how we interact with developers. It'll help to inform how we interact with those who want to come into the space to do affordable housing. And while I'm on that note, perhaps we should even look at how we can include partnering with all of the entities that are working in the affordable housing space. I think making sure that we are very intentional about looking at everybody who's doing this work, because goodness gracious knows we certainly are not in that business and we can't attempt to do it alone. But I think that word partnering with all existing partners, and even those who want to come into the space, you guys figure out the right way to frame it. But I think that needs to be included, and I would love to see us define equitable development. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, on to our final element, how we build. I was fine with what was in there. I don't have any comments. Anybody else? Commissioner Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. One of the things I'd like for us to consider is that we set a goal for having a 15-minute walk community where whatever is needed in a neighbor's daily life, they can get to within a 15-minute walk of their home. And I think one of the things we should track as well is the number of jobs created in our community versus the number of housing units built too. That's kind of one of the kind of indicators too. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Thank you. All right. Thank you, thank you. I know that was a bit laborious. I think it was important that it was. We'll refine it, and I think by the time we get to the approval stage, we'll be, hopefully everybody will be comfortable with the final product. So, Mike, I'm going to give you first dibs here. You've been here before us. Hopefully won't be here after us. You've been very patient, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. I really appreciate your time on this. There it is. Okay. So when it comes to the comp plan, I've read it over, and I'm going to say this right now. I'm coming to speak to you guys as chairman of the Nature Centers Commission in regards to Chapter 5. One thing I want to say is this, is that I really like it. I really like racial equity, and like Andrew Person said in the beginning here, we're one of the few local governments in the United States to be doing something like this, and that's amazing. It's monumental in my opinion, and I'm just glad to be here for it. That's all I have to say. One thing I do want to address with the environment is this. Now, if there's one thing I did before I moved to Gainesville, Florida, I did a lot of research on you guys and what you guys do when it comes to your environmental conservation policy. And it's rather spectacular because there are other governments in this state that have 10 times the budget you guys do, but yet you guys do a lot more than them. So that's one thing I am going to say. Going forward with this, I would like to tell you guys this. From the department and from the people that I've talked to on the advisory board and in the communities, one big thing that we're seeing is outreach. I do love that you guys mentioned after school programs. We have our 20 plus properties in nature centers, and we would love to run after school programs, but the problem is that that's a little bit difficult with staffing and funding. So going forward here, what I would like is if you guys could please, and believe you me, my committee would be more than happy to help you guys, and we'd be more than happy to coordinate with staff going further to kind of hash this thing out. But I would just like to address if we could please get something like that into the record. Just into the plan. Another thing I want to address too is that, and I think this was cleared up by Mr. Parsons behind me, is that we were initially afraid that, there wasn't a set policy and goals and criteria to meet Forever Florida's, bases when it comes to scoring local governments, but that has been cleared up. So therefore I don't want to address that anymore. I'm not going to bore anybody because it's late enough as it is. One thing too, I do like that you guys have an ambitious goal to be fully sustainable by 2045. That is great. One thing that I should make a recommendation to you as also chairman of the Nature Board, and also I would say as a citizen, but more as the chairman, include into your land development code to please request people who are going to build massive structures and massive houses to have solar on their roof. Because if I'm correct, the biggest issue that I would say with that matter would be the Solar Bill of Rights, but that deals in preemption in regards to denying it. I don't know if maybe we'd have to consult with the city attorney on this, but if we can ask, hey, in the land development code, you need to build, include solar or something that makes your building more carbon net zero, because that's a big problem that I see is that we have these massive buildings and they're just we have hundreds of thousands of square feet of just rooftops that are sitting there. So solar, I think, would be something we could definitely harness on that. And then my last comment is this. When it comes to local government, and I will leave it at this, one big problem in Florida especially is a little phenomenon called regulatory capture, and it's all over the state. The chairman of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is a land developer. I'm sorry, he's not an expert on conservation. He's an expert on destroying conservation, but he's not an expert on conservation. So please make sure that we talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for being with us all evening. Anybody else in chamber want to make any comments? Okay, Adam, I believe that you are with us tonight. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir. I am with you tonight. We have nobody on the line, but I'd like to read the number, if that's okay.
Sure.
1-800-742-1099. 1-800-742-1099. We'll sit tight for, another 30 seconds, if you don't mind.
I sure will. I discovered a Twitter feed called Dad Jokes. I will use them. I have access. I have motive. Our attorney's back there advising me not to do so. On advice of my attorney, I will refrain.
I feel like I hear people whispering my name in the background, like, save us, save us. All right, it doesn't seem like anybody's calling in, sir.
Okay, thank you. So anybody that did watch this or might watch it on replay, We'd love to hear your feedback. Please just go to the city's website. You'll see a button or a bug there, Imagine GNV. If you click that, you can see not only what you saw tonight, but all of the more deep kind of background, a lot of detail, as well as ways to give input and sort of participate in whatever format or means is most appropriate and accessible for you. So we'd love to hear that, and we'll incorporate all of that feedback before it comes back to the commission the next time we hear this. Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Mr. Mayor, I did have one final thought that's probably a question for the city attorney. Perhaps Andrew might be able to speak to this as well, but this has to do with the teeth in this document. A lot of great work has gone into this, and we're talking about establishing policy and rules, and my constituents and our neighbors and I myself am interested in how this will be enforced. What kind of mechanisms will be in place that will say, hey, these things that we're coming up with now, they're very serious, and we're not just saying it, but this is a document that has teeth. Can anybody speak to and how, I'm looking at Zariah back in the back as well. I'm assuming that perhaps the Office of Equity and Inclusion might be involved in that piece in some way. Can anybody speak at this point to the teeth in this document and how it will be enforced, how we envision that right now?
Yeah, and Andrew's probably the best person to answer that.
Okay.
This is a document required by the state and must be approved by the state, and every municipality must do it. It definitely is a legally binding document that sort of supersedes just about everything else we have besides the charter. And I did get word that there was a caller, so caller will get to you in a few minutes here. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to what the mayor said. The comprehensive plan is also the basis for our land use regulations through that they're primarily expressed through the land development.
You are now in a sub-conference.
There you go. So what I would sort of emphasize that once we're done with the plan, we're also probably going to need to take a look at our land development code. So if there are elements, because
you are now in the main conference.
That's the nuts and bolts, essentially. That's the implementing part of the plan. But it is, as the mayor said, it is a legal document. It is there are requirements for particularly on the development side, for development to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And that's all the policies of that. So the plan is it has an aspect that talks about and deals with private development, but I think as we saw tonight, the plan is much more than that. It also directs city actions, city investments. Those things I would say we have a little bit more latitude because obviously if we're saying something like we're on revise our interlocal agreements, for instance, and we have partners that are like no thanks. And that's something that is probably not something that somebody's going to sue us over. But when we have something that's related to development, that both is something that we have to be consistent about with development, and is also something that should be reflected in our land development code from an implementable basis. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ariola. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering what our next steps are and the next time we're seeing this. And I guess if those other elements staff's working on, the kind of more nitty gritty stuff is coming back and the next time we see it.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So I think right now our plan is to take the commission's feedback, which I did want to thank everybody. This is great. This is exactly what we wanted. A lot of really great feedback. We're also continuing to collect feedback on the drafts that are up. Our intent is at the end of this month to begin to work to integrate the feedback from the commission, the feedback from the community. We're also having meetings with the plan board at the same time to work through. As I mentioned in the beginning, we do have supplemental parts of each of these chapters that are more sort of issue specific or technical. We're still working on some of those, both with the plan board as well as with some of the internal staff. So I think the next sort of step, as we see it, is to sort of complete that that process of incorporating feedback, working through some of the supplemental parts of the plan with the plan board and with staff, and then bringing that back probably for maybe one more workshop before we start the actual adoption hearing with or adoption process with the plan board and the commission. I think, like we talked about before, the good news is, although I do want to move this project to its conclusion, but I think the good news is that we're on our own timetable as a city, and so we want to make sure it's done right and we have the plan, because we're going to live with it for the next decade. So,
right on. Okay, so just to summarize all that, y'all are going to take everything that you've gotten back, put it together, bring it back for one more workshop where we'll see all those additions or changes, get one last round of feedback, and then we'll kind of formalize the process through the attorney's office and the drafting and okay, very good. Okay, Adam, we'll go ahead and take our caller now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Abe Goldman was a late arrival. Mr. Goldman, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for all the effort that you put into this and the enormous, mostly very positive goals that you're expressing. However, I have a couple of general concerns and some very specific ones. One of them is that you have an enormous number of goals, and there's very little indication of a prioritization among the goals, even within the different categories. And I think it would help to try to at least establish a process for prioritization. You also have no assessment of costs for any of these or many of these objectives and strategies, and I think that should be incorporated as well. But let me make a couple of very specific suggestions, recommendations, or at least things to consider. There have been some unintended consequences of previous and current city policies, and I think that they ought to be addressed. They have very strong equity components. One of them, as was an issue in the current election, is the enormously high and rapid rate of growth of GRU utility expenses. And I think a general objective ought to be, and this has very strong equity implications for lower income residents in particular. So one of the goals ought to be to, if possible, reduce, but at very least stabilize the GRU rates for our residents. Second issue, and one that hasn't yet been addressed, but we're already getting a significant or a fair number of anecdotal, at least, reports of the Tenant Bill of Rights and its very rigorous enforcement causing small landlords to decide they can no longer afford to make really what are fairly minor but expensive upgrades to their rental properties. And they're often renting at well below market rates, but they're no longer able to do that. And tenants who are in that position are also facing significant rental increases, partly as a result. Now, the idea of a Tenant Bill of Rights is good, but the extreme enforcement of relatively minor limitations, or I would call, they're called infractions, but they're basically sort of lack of, living up to some of those standards, is having an unexpected consequence of both losing local landlord ownership and that personal interaction that involves with the tenants. But also, and I have no stake in this whatsoever, no personal stake in this,
Right.
but I've heard repeated stories of this.
Appreciate you sharing those points with us very much, and thanks for following along and calling in. I do, without getting into the two sort of specific issues, I want to really clarify that we don't prioritize in this document because that's what the commission does every year through a strategic planning process. What the commission does every year must adhere to the comprehensive plan. In other words, we can't do things that are in violation or in contrast with what our comp plan lays out for us. So we can every year as a body decide what are our top priorities and address those. They will all be part of the comp plan. The second is, that's why we don't mark it up or put a cost analysis with it. That is up to each year, each commission developing a budget and deciding what they're going to prioritize spending on. You could not do that with a comprehensive plan. So again, the comprehensive plan is more aspirational. What kind of city do we want to have? What will it take to get there? And then the operationalization of that plan is done every year through a budget process where the commission will make its priorities known, both in sort of fact and in where we choose to spend our money. So there's just two sort of different things on different levels, and that's why they this document is not necessarily meant to fulfill the intentions that the caller sort of laid out there. Commissioner Ariola, you had a point under member comment?
Yeah, thank you. I also just wanted to thank the caller. Obviously, those things that you brought up, as you mentioned, is something that we work on every year, and so I just wanted to thank him for waiting. And rest assured, this commission will take both that comment seriously. Two housekeeping things regarding meetings that we have scheduled in the future. One, for this Monday, I would like for us to reschedule for a later date when we can do a St. Michael's workshop properly in person. I think that, at least from what I've heard from the neighborhood, granted, they're not thrilled about the whole process, but a virtual workshop would just send the wrong message. And I don't want to have to participate in something like that, because that's almost like tacitly endorsing the virtual workshop. My expectation was that we would have something in person. So I know right now it's very difficult to do that because of the spread of Omicron, but we really should delay that until we can gather in person. So I'd like for that to happen without objection. And then secondly, I would like for us to reschedule our quarterly UAB meeting that is scheduled the first Monday of February, I believe. I will not be able to attend that. I would like to be able to attend that. And so I would just like to ask my colleagues the courtesy of scheduling that for another day.
Okay, thanks. A lot of work went into this workshop. So I think, I don't want to speak for anybody. I think if I had to predict what would happen if we canceled this workshop, is that the owner of the property would simply move on with the by right development, and that would be the end of any discussions. Because they own a piece of property, they have a zoning, and they can build something. And they have been through, as you know, many, many delays. And we can certainly ask if they'd like to delay this another, I don't know when it will be safe, probably 6 weeks from now, earliest. But the very, I think, easy response from them would be, we're not interested in delaying any further, and we're going to move forward with a project we can build with the existing rights. So I think there is more at risk for our community by trying to cancel this and reschedule it than there is by doing it and seeing if there is some common ground, and if necessary, scheduling a follow-up discussion that would keep the process moving. That's my feeling, but I could be wrong. I'll go with whatever the will of the commission is. Commissioner Sacco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll agree with you on that one. The development's been delayed more than a few times at this rate, and between notice and redoing the work, what's going to drop in 6 weeks? What new issue will happen in 6 weeks, in 12 weeks? So I don't want to keep postponing something that could be really good for the community. I get it. Zoom is not great. And there are many things I wish I could have done in person, like my swearing in, but I couldn't. And that's just the hard facts of the reality we're living in right now. And we can't wait for the perfect situation to move forward on things. You're never going to have it. That's just a hard reality of life. You have to do what you can, when you can, with what you have. And as for moving the UAB meeting, I don't know. We'd have to move it, I guess, to like another month, because they have their own, the UAB, that board has their own schedules as they volunteer their time to do this. So I don't know if it would just have to be moved out a whole nother month to the next time they can meet, or ask more of volunteers who do not get paid for this work to be here at a different time altogether.
I'll have to work with the chair of the UAB on that. That's a joint decision between their chair and me, and working with the clerk's office to schedule those meetings. As well, that was our budget meeting, right? And so that was set in our budget calendar a while ago. Okay. So. And
that would kind of derail the other conversations.
Yeah, I need to talk to GRU Finance also to see if pushing that back kind of delays. I just need. I'm willing to follow up and find out whether that would cause a serious disruption or not, and I can hopefully give you that feedback tomorrow at the general policy meeting.
I would really, really appreciate that. It's for personal reasons, and in the work environment that we're in, we don't often get personal days. So I just would really appreciate, I don't think we have to delay the UAB meeting, a month from now. And as for I'm just going to say this about the virtual workshop. The medium is the message. And I think it sends a really bad message if that's it. I would like to hear directly from the developers that they're not interested in engaging with the neighborhood anymore. That would be a 180 from their from everything that I've heard from them for the last year and a half. And I just think that it's the wrong message. I'm the district commissioner for the district in question. I think it sends the wrong message for the commission to host a meeting that I'm in objection to. I'm just voicing these concerns, and I would just appreciate if they would be heard. And
okay, well, we can't take action tonight, so we can reach out and find out more information before our meeting tomorrow where we can't take action. Okay, and I just saw Andrew nod his head that he'll help facilitate that. Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. On the UAB, I'm open to you working with the chair, and if that's a possibility or not, it's not derail our budget process. On the St. Michael's meeting, I agree with the mayor and Commissioner Sacco for the regions that they brought forward, and I believe we should hold the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I've got nothing else. We have got a general policy committee meeting tomorrow that has got some pretty heavy duty stuff on it, and I just want to remind the commission that I will need to excuse myself by 4:25. I guess we've got a canvassing board meeting that starts at 4:30. So I'll need 5 minutes to get down there for that. So we'll just try to be as efficient and effective tomorrow as we can. And with that, thank you all for who participated. I hope we helped, and we are adjourned.